Each of his fingers possessed a unique ability: the divine index finger that crushed all things, the divine middle finger of judgment, the divine ring finger with healing powers. His name was the One God. And how did he get this strong? Just by crushing ants in his mobile game. And it all began on an ordinary day, when he discovered that a strange new game had appeared on his phone. The moment he tapped on the treasure chest icon, it burst open dramatically. The screen displayed the words, "Welcome to Evil God Creator." Moments later, an ant crawled onto the screen, followed by a line of incomprehensible text. Instead of questioning reality like a sane person, he figured he would just tap randomly and see what happened. To his surprise, the ant was instantly crushed under his finger. A coin popped out of the screen, and the phone calmly announced, "Life of number 1 terminated. You have obtained 1 divine coin. Congratulations. You are 1 step closer to becoming a great evil god who pursues absolute power." He stared at the phone in confusion, wondering if he had just awakened some kind of hunter ability. If this had happened 20 years ago, he would have checked himself straight into a psychiatric hospital without hesitation. Unfortunately for his mental health, times had changed. 20 years ago, spatial rifts had opened across the world, and countless monsters had poured out like an interdimensional infestation. Humanity had nearly gone extinct. But everything changed when humans awakened supernatural abilities. The energy obtained from hunting monsters became humanity's last hope of survival. Hunters were classified from the godlike SS rank all the way down to the embarrassing G rank. Once a hunter's rank was determined, changing it was almost impossible. Shortly after this realization, he arrived at the ability testing center to have his powers evaluated. The staff member smiled politely and announced, "Congratulations, Mr. One God. You possess an ability constitution." His heart nearly exploded with excitement. His mind immediately filled with delusions of becoming a legendary hunter surrounded by admirers, fans, and probably several people willing to forgive his personality. In silent desperation, he prayed to anything listening. Just give him D rank. Hell, even F rank would be acceptable. Anything but E rank. The machine beeped. The staff member glanced at the result and spoke again. "Your rank is G rank." The word hit him like a brick to the face. G rank. The absolute bottom of the food chain. His ability was no different from that of an ordinary civilian. The staff member confirmed it with professional indifference, and then asked if he would like to register as a hunter for a fee of 8,000. He briefly considered it before realizing he couldn't even access a dungeon. Paying that fee would be like setting money on fire for fun, so he declined and left. That evening, he returned home irritated and mentally exhausted. Just as he was about to sleep, the phone beside him suddenly rang, snapping him awake instantly. Annoyed and wide-eyed, he picked it up and began crushing ants again, venting his frustration like a deranged god with anger issues. Before he knew it, divine coins were scattered all over the floor like loose change after a bar fight. The next morning, when he woke up, all the coins had merged into a small pile. The number displayed had changed from 1 to 100. The phone chimed again. "Congratulations, unnamed god. You have met the conditions to unlock the divine shop. Would you like to open it?" Without hesitation, he tapped yes. Opening the shop required 100 coins, and he spent them instantly without thinking twice. 1 coin on his bed physically vanished, confirming this bullshit was very real. However, once the shop opened, all the text was written in strange characters he couldn't understand. Even worse, every item inside cost 1 billion coins. He spent the entire night grinding ants like a lunatic and only managed to save up 300 coins. The prices were so absurd they felt personally insulting. Then the shop refreshed, and suddenly the top item only required 100 coins. Shrugging, he casually tapped it. A notification appeared. "You have obtained the exclusive skill, Blind God's Eye." He stared at the name in disbelief. Blind God? What kind of dumbass skill was that? Was it the eye of a blind person? What use could that possibly be? The answer came immediately. Everything went pitch black. He couldn't see a damn thing. Panic set in as he groped around for his phone, only to slam his toe into the corner of a table. The pain made him cry out like the universe had personally told him, "Fuck you." Then, just as suddenly, his vision returned. Terrified, he picked up his phone again, only to realize that he could now read the previously incomprehensible text in the shop. Inside were countless skills and items. After scrolling for a while, he found a universal ability, called Divine Index Finger, that crushes all things, classified as a growth-type skill. He tapped to acquire it. The phone confirmed the purchase. He stared at his finger skeptically, wondering what the hell this divine finger actually did. Almost immediately, the air conditioner behind him turned on by itself. He pointed at it and said, "Divine Index Finger." It turned off. He pointed at the computer, and it powered on. In the end, he realized the horrifying truth. His god-tier ability was essentially a glorified remote control. After discovering that his so-called divine power was basically a glorified remote control, he returned to the only thing that brought him peace: crushing ants. Black ants popped like bubble wrap under his finger, divine coins dropping out one after another. Then suddenly, a red ant appeared on the screen. This one was different. He tapped it once. Miss. He tapped again. Miss again. No matter how fast or how aggressively he tapped, the red ant dodged everything with infuriating precision. It moved like it had foresight, reflexes, and an ego problem. Realizing this had to be some kind of boss, he started tapping like a crackhead trying to win a claw machine. His finger cramped, his patience shattered. The red ant, the smug little bastard, escaped. Furious, he could only vent his rage by massacring more black ants. The phone coldly displayed a notification stating that his actions had exceeded 800, and that only 200 more actions remained before he obtained the evil god title. By this point, he was mentally and physically drained. He collapsed onto his bed and immediately passed out. While he slept, the phone activated Blind God's Eye automatically, unlocking an exclusive ability. That night, he found himself inside what looked like a movie theater. On the massive screen, the red ant appeared again, now walking with a cane like some tragic war veteran. The red ant limped toward a cave entrance and shouted to the ants inside that it had found where their food supply had fled to, but that it had been attacked by a terrifying god of the dark tribe. It warned them that escaping was the limit of its strength and that they needed to strike first. The ants inside burst out laughing, mocking it mercilessly. They called it a coward, saying a mere dark tribe god was nothing but a joke, and suggested it should have just died there instead of coming back to whine like a bitch. Suddenly, an elderly ant entered the cave, silencing everyone. Stroking his whiskers like a cliché anime elder, he declared that he sensed the presence of the dark god. This land belonged to the great emperor, and the existence of an evil god here was unacceptable. They would execute it immediately. The old ant placed his hand on the red ant's head, releasing a surge of energy that instantly healed its wounds. He ordered the red ant to lead the way, announcing that he would personally subjugate the so-called evil spirit. The ant army roared in unison, screaming about delivering death to the evil god. At that exact moment, he woke up. He dismissed the whole thing as a weirdly vivid dream about ants, because clearly that was the most reasonable explanation. His phone chimed. The red ant appeared on the screen again. His fighting spirit surged, and he prepared to crush it once and for all. Then things escalated real fast. Multiple red ants appeared, surrounding the screen. The one in the center shouted, "Nature's judgment upon great evil." A blue light shot out from the phone and sliced open his forehead, drawing blood. On the other side of reality, the ant army charged their power, chanting about subjugating an evil god and praising their sage. Before he could fully process what the hell was happening, a red light crashed down in the ant world, wiping out countless ants in an instant. On his end, he completely lost his shit and started smashing his phone like it had personally ruined his life. He slammed it so hard that smoke started coming out of it. Only after nearly destroying his beloved phone did he regain his senses. The screen was shattered, the room was filled with divine coins, and the phone calmly displayed a message. "Your actions have reached 1,000. Congratulations. You have obtained the evil god title Cruel Slaughterer." He stared at the screen in disbelief. Cruel Slaughterer? This was bullshit. He was a law-abiding citizen who paid his taxes and minded his own damn business. That title didn't fit him at all. As the coins began merging together, a ring formed from them. He picked it up and examined it. The ring emitted a faint fragrance that instantly refreshed his mind and cleared his thoughts. Curious, he slipped it onto his pinky finger. The moment he did, energy surged through his entire body. All fatigue vanished as if he had just been reborn. The phone chimed again and activated Blind God's Eye to appraise the ring. Druid's Ring. Contains the life force of the forest. Enhances rapid growth abilities. With a ring like this and an appraisal skill that could see through bullshit, he began to wonder if his hunter rank had increased. There was no way someone with gear like this was still G rank. Fueled by blind confidence, he decided to return to the testing center. When he arrived, the staff member looked at him skeptically and reminded him that the error rate of the test was less than 1%. Retesting would cost 580,000. Hearing that number instantly crushed his soul. Reality slapped him back into place, and he apologized, saying he would come back another time. Clearly, the ring had gone to his head. As he sat down on a nearby sofa, Blind God's Eye activated automatically and began appraising people around him without consent. A 30-year-old man with hemorrhoids, a 41-year-old man with kidney deficiency. Then his attention was drawn to a young woman in the distance. Unlike everyone else, her appraisal displayed a name and a strange condition tingling. Confused and curious like an absolute dumbass, he walked toward her. Reaching out, he awkwardly asked if she was experiencing a tingling sensation. The woman stared at him like she was deciding whether to kill him on the spot. Lightning gathered in her hand. She was clearly seconds away from turning him into charcoal. Just as things were about to go catastrophically wrong, his phone rang. He grabbed it and bolted like a guilty man escaping the scene of a crime. After narrowly avoiding being electrocuted into a smoking corpse by the lightning girl, he escaped the testing center in record time. His phone rang again before his heart rate could return to normal. This time it was his sister, ordering him to pick up his niece from the park. He complied, because even newly minted evil gods understood the fear of older sisters. When he arrived, he found his niece waiting, small, adorable, and radiating pure chaos. Looking at her face, he couldn't help but think how someone so demonic as his sister could give birth to something this angelic. Naturally, his hand moved on its own and pinched her cheeks. She immediately exploded in rage, stomping her feet and yelling that she told him not to do that. He knew instantly that this tantrum was going to last at least an hour. At that exact moment, Blind God's eye activated again. The appraisal result appeared clearly. Kai Cheng Yen, current desire chocolate cone. Without wasting a single second, he suggested they go get ice cream. Her anger evaporated immediately. Her mouth watered. Crisis resolved. They headed straight to an ice cream shop. The clerk greeted them cheerfully as he pulled out a pile of coins to pay. The enthusiasm on the clerk's face vanished instantly. The clerk silently sorted the coins like someone regretting their life choices, then handed over a noticeably smaller than normal chocolate cone. He stared at it, deeply offended by this injustice. That was when his god complex kicked in. Activating the divine index finger, he pointed at the ice cream machine. The machine went absolutely fucking berserk, dispensing ice cream nonstop like it was possessed. His niece hugged the cone like a dragon guarding treasure, refusing to share even a bite. He sighed and accepted his fate. At that moment, the phone chimed ominously. Title activated, Cruel Slaughterer. Due to title effects, your combat fortune has greatly increased. The ground began to shake violently. Crimson eyes opened in the sky like reality itself had just woken up angry. A massive horned monster emerged from a spatial rift and immediately began destroying everything in sight. Cars flipped. Buildings cracked. Panic spread instantly. He grabbed his niece and ran like hell. Unfortunately, she tripped over a rock. As he helped her up, the monster loomed right behind him. The creature roared and lunged. With nowhere to escape, he closed his eyes and prepared to get absolutely obliterated. At that moment, lightning tore through the air. The lightning girl from earlier appeared out of nowhere and slammed the monster with a thunder attack. The monster tanked it without a scratch. She fired again. Still nothing. She cursed under her breath, realizing she was completely outmatched. A-rank monsters were on a different level, and even as a B-rank hunter, she couldn't win. She noticed him and his niece behind her and immediately shielded them, shouting for them to run while she held the monster back. Before she could finish speaking, the monster struck again. Her energy faltered. She couldn't activate her power in time. Death was seconds away. Inside her mind, emotions exploded. Rage, regret, and an overwhelming desire for revenge flooded her thoughts. At that exact moment, a voice echoed in her consciousness. Crush all things. Divine index finger. Power surged into her body like a lightning storm breaking loose. Strength beyond anything she had ever felt filled her veins. She unleashed a thunderstorm so violent it tore the battlefield apart. When the dust settled, the monster was subdued. The crowd erupted into cheers, calling her the Thunder Emperor. She stared at her hands in disbelief, unable to understand what had just happened. He approached her with his niece, thanking her sincerely for saving them. She waved it off, relieved they were safe. Later that evening, he stood alone on an overpass, replaying the incident in his mind. That monster hadn't appeared randomly. It came for him. It wanted his divinity. The phone confirmed his suspicion. Trial overcome. Cruel Slaughterer rank elevated by 1 stage. Reward evil god abilities may now be obtained without consuming coins. All of this chaos traced back to one thing: the phone. The thought made him want to throw it into the ocean. Before he could act on that impulse, the phone displayed a new message written in strange characters. In another world, the ant army was invading the Dark Tribe's stronghold. The Dark Tribe's saint was praying desperately for salvation. The phone asked him if he would save the trembling little creature begging for help. He hesitated for half a second, then tapped the screen. The red ant was crushed instantly. The phone asked for his name. He entered it. The one god. The saint pledged herself to him. Immediately, a new title appeared. Good God title obtained, Benevolent Savior. Now holding both good and evil god titles, his alignment shifted from evil to neutral. As a reward, he received 100,000 divine coins. Overjoyed, he rushed into the divine shop and purchased a bottle of Growth God's protection. After appraising it and discovering its extremely questionable origin, he shrugged and drank it anyway. Then he drank more. Nothing happened at first. Then everything went dark, and he collapsed. When he regained consciousness, he found himself lying at home, his body feeling strangely refreshed, despite having blacked out like a drunk god. His phone lit up up immediately, informing him that due to the increased synchronization rate with Evil God Creator, several systems had been upgraded. Before he could even process what that meant, something brushed against his hand. He looked down and froze. His bed was crawling with ants, not metaphorical ants, not imaginary ants, actual, physical ants, swarming over his sheets like he had personally offended the insect kingdom. He panicked and jumped off the bed, sprinting for the door. It wouldn't open. The ants opened their jaws and began biting him, tiny stabs of pain stacking up until he was hopping around like an idiot performing some kind of cursed ritual. He rushed for the window, forgetting he lived on the 3rd floor. He tried smashing through the glass, only to rebound off it and slam onto the floor. As despair kicked in, rage surged. He activated the divine index finger and crushed dozens of ants instantly. That's when the remaining ants calmly picked up bows and arrows like this, a goddamn medieval siege. Arrows flew. His body was pierced over and over until breathing itself became difficult. Just as everything was fading, his eyes locked onto his lifeline, a can of insecticide sitting nearby. With the last of his strength, he grabbed a lighter and ignited the spray. Fire erupted, incinerating the ant army instantly. This, he realized, was the power of a god. Unfortunately, it was also the power of an idiot. His room caught fire immediately, and his body refused to move. As smoke filled the room, the phone displayed another cheerful notification. A high-ranking evil god offers you a gift. Accepting may lock your alignment to evil. He tapped accept without hesitation. Nothing happened at first. Then the phone informed him that fragments of the silently creeping nightmare's power were infiltrating his abilities. Panic set in. His divine index finger wouldn't activate. Just as he was about to die roasted like an idiot, the window shattered. Lightning crashed through the room. The lightning girl appeared again and dragged him out moments before the flames consumed everything. He woke up in the hospital. His niece immediately demanded proof that he was really her uncle and forced him to say an extremely humiliating password. Before he could recover from that emotional damage, his sister stormed in, screaming about being called a chubby auntie. Before he could even apologize properly, a flower basket mysteriously appeared at the hospital door. Somewhere nearby, the lightning girl stood on a rooftop, watching him thoughtfully like a stalker who hadn't accepted it yet. After recovering, he noticed that the ants were still harassing him in the most disrespectful way possible. The phone notified him that the ant saint and her followers were offering tribute. He accepted, and a glowing stone appeared, fruit of the world tree. He ate it and immediately regretted it, because it tasted like something that had marinated in an outhouse for 80 years. Still, the warmth that followed healed him completely. As a reward, a new function unlocked divine grace. He wondered what ants liked, glanced at a nearby bag of sugar, and dumped it as divine blessing. In the ant world, sugar rained from the sky. The ants healed instantly, limbs regenerating, morale skyrocketing. The phone informed him he had gained 101 true believers. Faith generation unlocked. He found this ridiculous but also weirdly satisfying. Shortly after, he visited a second-hand item market to sell something for house repairs. While there, Blind God's eye continued appraising people without consent, exposing frauds and scammers left and right. When 3 shady men attempted to sell fake armor for hundreds of millions, he interfered like an idiot with a justice complex. One of them grabbed him aggressively, demanding accountability. He activated divine index finger. The armor crumbled instantly. The scammers immediately bowed and fled, realizing they had fucked with the wrong person. The shop staff stared at him with awe, assuming he was some reclusive high-ranking hunter. The staff examined it. Magic power value 2. At most a D-rank item. He snatched it back. Blind God's eye whispered. Best given to Sparky nearby. No, not the Sparky from Clash Royale. Sparky was indeed lurking, watching him recover from near death like it was nothing. She thought, could it be a supreme potion? He is just G-rank. How the fuck did he get that? Maybe he is truly high-ranking. Then she scolded herself. Wait, I am acting like a stalker again. He approached her, blushing like a dumbass, shoved the ring into her hand, and said, please accept this. It will help you. Then he bolted. Sparky stood there, bewildered. Later at the testing center, researchers freaked out. Your energy reaches 7,000. Exceptional even among A-rank hunters. Sparky stared at her hands. That ring had casually elevated her to A rank. Nearby S-rank hunters applauded. Sparky's sister, Shang Wei, sneered. Do not get carried away, Shan Li. You are merely A rank. If you act on revenge, I will not forgive you. Sparky thought, sorry sis, I cannot obey. As long as that man helps me exceed my limits, revenge will be mine. Meanwhile, he was asleep, dreaming of the Ant Emperor. The Emperor ordered General Kamakiri to lead 5 million troops to subjugate him. Kamakiri bowed. I obey. He jolted awake, panicked. Shit, this is not just a dream. Last time it was 100,000 ants. Now it is 50 times that. The phone confirmed it. 3 days until invasion. As if that wasn't enough, the silently creeping nightmare contacted him again, asking for human sacrifices. He blocked it instantly. Blind God's eye then projected the image of an ant general, Kamakiri, announcing her intention to sever his head. He tried appraising himself. After nearly popping his eyes out, it finally succeeded. Fragile and timid, he cursed. He sits on his bed in exchange for necessary items. Grant's fire works better with a divine index finger. In reality, it produces flames weaker than a lighter. He is deceived again. He should have discarded it back then. He remembers Growth God's protection. He consumes 200 bottles consecutively. The evil god creator synchronization rate increases to 10%. He polishes his sword 20 times and collapses at his computer desk. Sparky purchases small gifts, hoping to engage him in deeper conversation. She arrives at his door. She rings the doorbell. No one answers despite repeated attempts. Sparky notices the door is not fully closed. She carefully opens it and calls out to see if her boyfriend is home. His room is empty, and now he is a captive in some warehouse. But because he drank 20 times yesterday, the protagonist is still asleep, adrift in a sea of pleasant dreams. His 3 kidnappers watch him in confusion as he laughs to himself. Excellent. He wants them all. He awakens. What is happening? A kidnapping. The rooster headman says mockingly. Impressive that he can sleep in this situation. Blind God's eye displays male human. Special note uses low, grade flame. Male human. Special note underdeveloped muscles. Looking at these descriptions, these are the fraudsters he encountered at the item shop. What do you want? The protagonist asks. The rooster headman says, we seek compensation. Naturally, he ruined our transaction. The protagonist says awkwardly, what should he do? He does not have his phone. The thin man holds up his phone. They brought it for him. Blind God's eye alerts our boy that the ant army is 20 meters from reaching his location. He shouts urgently, "Auntie me quickly," and throw away the phone, but it was too late. Countless ants pour from the phone. They cover the thin man's body instantly. Within 1 second, the ant army devours him completely. The rooster headman and his companion watch in shock. He turns to the protagonist and curses, saying he can control insects. The goon gathers fire in his hand and unleashes flames toward the ant army, burning and consuming everything. The protagonist watches. This is supposed to be a low-grade flame. The rooster headman incinerates the ant army. He turns toward the protagonist menacingly. Now they will settle the account for killing his subordinate. Our boy tenses up. He is done for. Suddenly, the rooster headman stumbles. He collapses. A stone strikes his head. Blood pours from the wound. The protagonist looks down. The ant army has deployed catapults. The large man attempts to escape. The door will not open. The ant army's catapults launch. Blood splatters. The protagonist panics. Even those massive flames cannot eliminate the army. Can he escape this place alive? Had he known they were this formidable, he should have discarded the phone from the beginning. The ant general mocks. Evil God, your subordinates are dead. Now, he will eliminate him immediately and transform him into His Majesty's sustenance. The protagonist's phone chimes. The display reads, activating minor miracle. Lightning strikes. Countless ants are eliminated instantly. Sparky descends majestically before him. He rejoices. The ant general thinks with fury at such contempt for the emperor's army while not acting personally, and to command such a powerful subordinate. That evil god is truly an evil god among evil gods, capable of destroying the empire. The general removes its armor and roars. Today he, Kamakiri, shall perish here, but he will at least eliminate one more of your subordinates. Sparky continues electrocuting them. Protagonist stands behind, grinning foolishly, completely unaware of the approaching danger. The ant general whispers, 1,000 blades that sever all. I am your servant. Grant me your great power. I sacrifice all my subordinates to you. The unaware subordinates shout for the general to take cover. The ant general severs the heads of the remaining ants with one strike. Sparky and protagonist are stunned. After eliminating its subordinates, the ant general emanates overwhelming pressure. Blind God's eye activates. Kamakiri, female. Special note, Imperial general intends to sever Sparky's head with 1,000 blades. Before protagonist can react, the ant general leaps toward Sparky. Sparky hastily activates her lightning. The ant general splits the lightning. It charges toward Sparky with overwhelming momentum. The blade flashes. Sparky lies in a pool of blood. Rage consumes protagonist's mind. These cursed ants. She saved his life 3 times. A notification appears. You may use divine power to alter a mortal fate. This will consume 100 Zalazar divine coins. Protagonist confirms without hesitation. Golden light fills his eyes. Using divine power to reverse time and alter fate, he returns to the moment the ant general severs the lightning. The ant general charges towards Sparky with overwhelming force. Sparky has no time to react and prepares for death. Protagonist's chains shatter. He stands and pulls Sparky behind him. He glares at the ant general with murderous intent. Sparky observes his fierce display. She thinks he truly is a master. Protagonist shouts, a mere lowly ant. He raises his middle finger under judgment. Divine middle finger. The ant general is obliterated by this strike. Protagonist watches all this with a calm expression while Sparky gazes at him with admiration. He picks up a small knife and asks curiously what it's for. The next moment, he throws the knife away because it's scorching hot. She removes her helmet and excitedly asks if he's the hermit. Then she actually kneels down and begs protagonist to take her as his disciple. With a shocked face, He says he's just the lowest ranked hunter. He only defeated the Ant General thanks to his system. There's no way he can teach her anything. But Sparky still clings to him. Even when he's watching wholesome content, Sparky watches along with him. Protagonist asks her speechlessly how long she plans to stay at his place. Sparky says she'll leave when he accepts her as his disciple. Protagonist tells her helplessly that he's just a G rank hunter. Sparky says that just the ring he gave her made her much stronger. Since he gave her something so precious, she wants a chance to make amends. Afterwards, Sparky carries bags of cement and starts repairing his house. Before long, his previously dilapidated room becomes exquisitely renovated by Sparky. Then, protagonist plans to find something to eat with Sparky. But just then, an emergency call comes in. Sparky says there won't be time for a meal. She puts on her helmet and prepares to leave. Protagonist takes out a bottle of Growth God's protection for her to bring along. After thanking him, Sparky flies off into the distance. Moments later, he arrives at a restaurant to eat. The restaurant is playing news. The host announces that the S-rank monster Tra has appeared. Fortunately, a hunter arrived at the scene in time, but buying the citizens time to escape is already her limit. The hunter currently facing Drake alone is B-rank hunter Thunder Empress. Meanwhile, after rescuing a citizen, Sparky stays behind to cover the retreat, facing an S-rank monster. Even Sparky feels uncertain, but there's no time to think. The monster's attack is already upon her. Sparky jumps and unleashes her lightning power. After being struck by this attack, Tri falls silent. The on-site host commentates that Hunter Thunder Empress has defeated Trey. The crowd erupts in cheers. Sparky also happily thinks she's defeated the S-rank monster. But the next moment, a tentacle strikes. With one blow, it sends Sparky flying. This strike directly causes Sparky to lose her combat ability. At this moment, Sparky sees the Growth God's protection beside her. Meanwhile, Tra is charging straight toward the crowd. The next moment, after drinking the potion, Sparky is back at full health. Her entire body surges with lightning power that can tear through anything. Then, she unleashes 1 billion volts. This strike directly tears the S-rank monster apart. Afterward, a reporter interviews Sparky. Sparky excitedly says to the camera that she did it, and that it is all thanks to the potion her teacher gave her. This video already has 2 million views. A celebrity like this is actually eating noodles at his place. The protagonist tells her that she should probably go home, or her family will worry. Sparky says bitterly that no one will worry about her. The protagonist comforts her, saying that what parents would not worry about such a beautiful daughter. Sparky says dejectedly that her parents both died in the Abyss Falling Dragon incident. The Abyss Falling Dragon was incredibly powerful. Humanity suffered millions of casualties to kill it. The protagonist immediately covers his mouth in shame. Then, he tells her to eat his portion of noodles with black bean sauce as well. Sparky immediately beams with joy. At this moment, his phone displays a notification. You have fulfilled the other party's affection and trust values. If the other party says the next keyword, you can activate faith. Keyword to activate faith: believe in the one God. The protagonist thinks dismissively that this is not some girl-raising game, but then he thinks again, will activating faith give him lots of divine coins like it did with the saint? Who knows when the ant army will attack again? Either way, the more divine coins, the better. Then, he asks his future wife if she can repeat a phrase after him. It is believe in the one God. After saying this, he kneels on the ground and says shamefully that it is too forced after all. The protagonist apologizes for saying such strange things. With no hesitation, the beauty says she believes in the one God like a cute puppy. The next moment, the protagonist's phone notifies him that faith has been successfully generated. Congratulations. Song Miri is your first follower on Earth. The skill sharing option has been generated. You can borrow your believer's power. He immediately says furiously that this damn game is not giving him any coins, and that he will uninstall it right now. Sparky looks at him with confusion. At this moment, a portal appears behind Sparky. Many ants emerge from it. They are carrying treasure chests, wanting to make peace with the protagonist. Unaware of this, the protagonist wants to test whether he can use Lightning Storm. Then, he raises his hand and activates skill sharing. The next moment, he actually unleashes Lightning Storm. Instantly, the massive energy directly rips off his roof. This strike also electrocutes the ant delegation into ashes. Sparky looks at him with an excited expression. Teacher, so you can use lightning too. You are really amazing. Meanwhile, he wants to cry, but he has no tears. His house was just repaired, and his neighbors scouted that the protagonist should let them live peacefully. On the other side, in the ant world, after the ant emperor learns that his delegation was annihilated by the protagonist, he immediately sends out all his elite forces in fury, vowing to eliminate the protagonist. Meanwhile, he is currently watching Sparky run. Before long, Sparky completes 100 laps. The protagonist hands her a bottle of Growth God's protection. To him, it is just a drink, but it is effective for Sparky. Since he has decided to take her as his disciple, he must do something for her, but he can only give her these potions. At this point, Sparky asks what to do next. He tells her to do squats first. Then, he thinks of using the blind god's eye to appraise her. Maybe it can tell him how to conduct training. So, he begins appraising Sparky. But the next moment, the system notifies him that he has reached the inner mind of the target. The protagonist arrives at an extremely empty place. Then, a blinding light appears before his eyes. A massive lightning tiger, bound tightly by iron chains, appears before him. Sparky's true nature is S-rank, sealed for 10 years. So, Sparky is an S-rank hunter. Back then, the divine index finger that crushes all things briefly unsealed her. In other words, breaking those chains will release all her power. Then, he attacks the chains with the divine index finger, but he can only break a small portion at a time, so he has to give up for now. Moments later, he bids farewell to Sparky. Then, the protagonist returns home, looking at the messy house. He is quite troubled. At this moment, his phone rings. Silently creeping nightmare is looking at him mournfully. All-slaying heavenly blade is looking at him resentfully. He thinks to himself, is this guy the owner of that fruit knife? But all-slaying heavenly blade says his sword is not some mere fruit knife, but a divine blade capable of slaying gods. The protagonist expresses disbelief at this. Wait, can these guys actually read his thoughts? These damn stalkers have now become two. Silently creeping nightmare requests to be unblocked. All-slaying heavenly blade requests the return of his divine sword. Watching this scene, the protagonist becomes furious. He nearly lost his life to obtain the divine sword. All-slaying heavenly blade proposes that if he returns the divine sword, he will give him back the offering from the ant delegation, 2 million divine coins. The protagonist curses angrily that he is truly despicable, flaunting stolen money. Silently creeping nightmare scoffs at this, stating that if he hands over the divine sword to it, it will pay 10 million divine coins. The protagonist is immediately tempted. With 10 million, he can purchase suitable lower-tier omnipotence or items, and buy many potions for Sparky. All-slaying heavenly blade feels very uneasy about this proposal. Seeing his appearance, silently creeping nightmare mocks him as a beggar. All-slaying heavenly blade is angered by this and proposes to grant him his authority. Then, all-slaying heavenly blade demonstrates his authority zenith of the sword. He says that using his authority, no master will be his match. He agrees with this. Throughout history, the sword has been every man's aspiration. Silently creeping nightmare laughs mockingly, while demanding that he should accept its authority rose that blooms at night. It says that using its authority, he can subdue enemies effortlessly. The protagonist immediately devises a plan. Do either of you want to add anything more to your bids? Moments later, the protagonist obtains zenith of the sword, 2 million divine coins, and 3 uses of the all-slaying heavenly blade treasury, plus rose that blooms at night. He thinks to himself that the all-slaying heavenly blade treasury can only be used 3 times, so he needs to use it sparingly. Then, the protagonist wants to try the other 2 abilities. He sits on the ground and shouts, "Rose that blooms at night," but nothing happens. His phone notifies him that Rose that blooms at night can only be activated when the owner is asleep. He shouts speechlessly that it activates after he falls asleep. So how is he supposed to know what ability this is? He is a fool for believing the stalker's words. Then, the protagonist uses zenith of the sword, but still nothing happens. This scene angers him enough to cause constipation for 3 years. The next moment, his phone notifies him that zenith of the sword is activated. Then, the protagonist uncontrollably mutters that he is going to cut everything down. The small knife in his hand radiates evil power. Then, the protagonist uncontrollably licks the small knife and runs toward the restaurant next door. After arriving, he frantically helps the restaurant chop 100,000 green onions. By evening, he returns home exhausted. The protagonist mutters, "What kind of terrible zenith of the sword randomly controls people?" Fortunately, nothing major happens. Before long, he falls into a deep sleep. Moments later, the ant army appears on his rooftop. Seeing him asleep, they charge toward him. At this moment, a rose actually grows from his chest. The rose opens its enormous mouth and devours all the ant forces. Then, it closes its mouth. The mother mosquito exclaims in shock that it is the nightmare flower. 3,000 years ago, it devoured 90% of the continent's population and was called the sinful calamity god, the apostle of the silently creeping nightmare, the nightmare flower. The mother mosquito says calmly not to fear. Today will surely go down in the Blood Clan's history. Then she charges toward him. Seeing this, the other ants also begin their assault, but their attacks have no effect on the rose. In the blink of an eye, the rose devours all the ants. Seeing this, the mother mosquito roars that although she cannot kill the evil god, she will at least make the calamity god's apostle, the monster flower, accompany her in death. Then she unleashes her strongest strike, but the rose devours her ultimate move in a single bite. The mother mosquito watches the scene in disbelief. Then the rose devours her in one bite. When the protagonist wakes up the next day, he only feels extremely bloated. He groggily picks up his phone. It displays that the saint and her followers are desperately requesting aid. He quickly activates the blind god's eye to see what is happening. The saint and her followers have been poisoned by the bee clan. He thinks to himself, did you poke a beehive trying to get honey? He opens his computer, wanting to search how to treat ant poisoning. His phone notifies him that due to the one god's concern for the believer's earnest plea, the miracle option has been activated. For believers, miracles are one of the meanings of a god's existence. According to his miracle orientation situation, believers will either revere him more or fear him more. Activating a healing miracle requires 100,000 divine coins. He clicks confirm without hesitation. Part of the fruit of the world tree that the one god absorbed will be used as material for the miracle. They should be fine now. After doing this, he suddenly feels very sleepy. In the blink of an eye, he falls back asleep. His phone notifies him that the benevolent god title, Benevolent Savior, has risen from E rank to D rank. The one god's alignment has changed from evil to neutral. Several benevolent gods, especially Endless Abundance, are beginning to notice him. On the other side, in the ant world, the saint and her people all have ashen faces. They are all praying for a miracle. The next moment, a raindrop falls. Immediately, countless raindrops follow, and the deadly poison on the ants is washed away by the rain. The saint rises and shouts that the one god has saved them once again. Now, they must repay the god with the tribe's most sincere trust. They will create offerings to sacrifice to the god. After an unknown amount of time, he wakes up groggy. Sparky is actually at his place. She says the training time passed and he did not show up, so she came to check. Then she asks what the statue on the table is. The protagonist looks up. The statue of the one god was made by the dark tribe with a grateful heart, imitating the one god. Its feature is that it is extremely ugly. The protagonist says speechlessly that he does not know what that hideous thing is. But Sparky says the statue is just like him, looking more handsome the more you look at it. Then she asks if she can take the statue. The protagonist tells her to do as she pleases. After sending Sparky away, he prepares to watch some wholesome content, but his phone notifies him that the world tree sapling is sick and will wither in 24 hours. He hastily takes out Growth God's protection, but it does not work. The world tree is the fruit that healed him when he was injured. In other words, if he cures it, he can sell its fruit. He searches through the divine shop for quite a while and finally finds an item, Tears of Endless Abundance. Only those certified as good people by the goddess can use it. Purchasing it will generate a quest. Moments later, he arrives on the street picking up cigarette butts. To save the world tree, he actually has to do this kind of thing. After picking for a long time, his goodwill only increases by 10%. He still needs 90% more to complete the quest. Suddenly, a voice calls out, asking what he is doing on his turf. The protagonist turns around to see a very muscular homeless man. He thinks to himself that he has heard homeless people are very sensitive about their territory. He quickly pulls out a $1 bill and hands it to him. But seeing this, the homeless man actually shouts angrily that he dares to give charity to Choi Gang-san. Choi Gang-san. The protagonist remembers that he is an S-rank hunter who started as a sanitation worker. Choi Gang-san snatches the dollar bill and says that since it is his sincerity, he will accept it. He looks at his phone puzzled, thinking that he clearly gave charity to someone, so why has his goodwill not increased? He looks at Choi Gang-san drinking alcohol. He actually gave charity to that kind of drunkard. No wonder his goodwill did not increase. The protagonist calls out, dissatisfied, Grandpa, and Choi Gang-san immediately shouts angrily, asking why he called him Grandpa. He quickly takes out a plastic bag and says quietly, asking him to please put the bottle here and that he will take care of it, calling him Big Brother. Hearing him call him Big Brother, Choi Gang-san immediately beams with joy. Just then, an alarm sounds in the distance. A monster has appeared. Protagonist immediately decides to make a run for it, but Choi Gang-san swiftly grabs him. Then, with one leap, he takes flight. After coming to his senses, he looks down. He nearly dies of fright on the spot. Before long, they fly to a factory building. Meanwhile, protagonist has already lost consciousness. When Choi Gang-san releases his grip, he collapses to the ground. Before them stands a massive toad monster. Choi Gang-san mutters that tonight's drinking snack will be toad legs. After saying this, he charges toward the toad. At this moment, protagonist's system notifies him that it has detected killing intent threatening the authority owner. Then, the nightmare flower emerges from his body. The nightmare flower opens its enormous mouth and bites toward both the toad monster and Choi Gang-san. In the blink of an eye, the nightmare flower swallows them both in a single bite. Meanwhile, in his daze, protagonist arrives at a forest. He stands up, only to discover a person wearing white clothes standing before him. He steps forward and asks, stuttering, where this is. That person removes their hat and says that he has returned, his great and merciful God. As he stands stunned, cracks suddenly appear before his eyes. Then he returns to reality. He immediately sees Choi Gang-sen lying on the ground, covered in filth. Choi Gang-sen cries out for his mother, saying he's scared because a huge flower ate him. Good grief, why does it smell so bad? Did he fall into an outhouse? Protagonist mutters. Then protagonist's phone notifies him that he has defeated the evil god's subordinate, contributed to world peace, and exceeded the goodwill quest. As a reward, he is given the miraculous item, Tears of Endless Abundance. The tears effect activates to heal the sick world tree sapling. He immediately beams with joy. He can sell the world tree fruit and become wealthy. Congratulations on successfully reviving the world tree. He has laid the foundation for the Dark Tribe's revival. To thank him, the members of the Dark Tribe have additionally offered a statue of the one god. After sending Choi Gang-san to the hospital, he returns home. Looking at the statue on the table, he is speechless. Where does this thing even resemble him? His phone notifies him that because the statue resembles him, the empathy rate between him and the ants in the evil god creator's world has risen to 10%. At this moment, a message pops pops up on his phone. Our great and merciful one God. He looks at his phone, never imagining he would one day be messaging with ants. Then another message appears, begging him to save their poor tribe members, dying dark tribe members in a special situation after being attacked by magical beasts. Protagonist looks at the ants lying on the ground. He immediately shouts angrily, asking who did this. He tells them to take him to find those magical beasts. He will crush them with his own hands. After hearing his words, the ants immediately cry tears of emotion. Then he tells them to lead the way. Perhaps because they are ants, they move very slowly. Finally, the ants stop and gaze ahead in terror. He immediately zooms in on his phone to see what is happening. When he sees clearly, he tenses up. It is actually a dense swarm of cockroaches. Immediately, protagonist turns around and flees at full speed. The ants leading the way also panic at the sight of the cockroaches, desperate to escape. However, the saintess tells them not to panic. She points behind them and shouts that the one God who protects the tribe has always been with them. But when she turns around, she sees him running away. The saintess cannot believe what she is witnessing. The other ants see him fleeing and cry out in despair that they have been abandoned by their God and that they are screwed. Moments later, he stares at the cockroach corpses covering the ground. Fortunately, because he hates cockroaches, he had stocked up on plenty of cockroach poison at home. The ants clean up the battlefield, finishing off any cockroaches still clinging to life. He looks at the dejected Saint Tess with confusion. He asks her what is wrong, since they have already driven back the beasts. Upon hearing this, the saintess bursts into tears and cries that she dared to briefly doubt the one God's intentions, that she is unworthy of serving the one God, and begs to be executed. Protagonist is about to comfort her when his phone displays a notification. The message states that he has met the conditions to generate an exclusive divine power, divine thumb of multiplication. He immediately clicks to obtain it. Looking at the overly dramatic description, it is as embarrassingly pretentious as always. Just as he is about to test this ability, his online manager sends a message asking to meet in person. But when he arrives at the location, he discovers that the person is actually a man. He is left speechless. He decides to freeload a meal and then make his escape. However, the man keeps staring at him and shouts at protagonist to work hard on his manhwa, saying that as a manager, protagonist has full potential but is wasting it. Protagonist stammers, trying to figure out how to deceive him. Suddenly, his phone rings. The screen shows that another group of beasts is attacking the Dark Tribe, asking if he wants to multiply the Dark Tribe ants to drive them away. He immediately selects multiply. The man notices that he is playing a game, stands up, and slaps him hard across the face. Meanwhile, in the ant world, the ants stand ready in formation below. The saintess stands on a high platform with both hands raised, shouting that the Great One God will soon eliminate all the beasts. Shortly after, his phone displays that he has successfully defeated the Destruction God's beast and earned 300 million divine coins. At this moment, he walks alone on the street. After a struggle, he has successfully protected his dignity. His phone notifies him that Endless Abundance has offered to sponsor him as a special reward for his ranking as a benevolent savior. The one God can freely choose any ability, with all costs covered by Endless Abundance. In that case, he naturally chooses the most expensive option. He selects Heaven and Earth Creation, an exclusive divine power of the Supermoon God, with a price tag of 1 followed by 100,000 zeros. However, the phone notifies him that the one God is far from meeting the requirements to use Heaven and Earth Creation to adapt to the one God's level. Heaven and Earth Creation has been partially adjusted and is now changed to a one-time use of false Heaven and Earth Creation. The world undergoes certain changes. That night, everyone stares at the sky in shock. A second moon has appeared beside the original moon. In a different place, a man was trembling with fear. In front of him, a naked man was standing amid piles of bloody corpses. The Tarzan look-alike guy asks if the Lightning Emperor was the one causing trouble for the guild master. The man confirms it with a twisted look. The perverted Tarzan declares that he will toy with her under the beautiful yellow moon. The following day, suffering from a throbbing headache, the protagonist sits on the steps while training Sparky. Sparky manages to finish 500 laps in only 5 minutes. After that, he asks her to hold a plank so he can once again enter her mindscape. He strictly tells Sparky not to move, then activates Blind God's Eye on her. Soon after, he steps into Sparky's inner world again. By now, the Lightning Tiger no longer shows hostility toward him. Using the Divine Index finger, the protagonist begins breaking the chains. While many chains are still intact, a significant number have already been shattered. The Lightning Tiger then affectionately licks his face. Once he exits the mindscape, the protagonist asks Sparky to test her strength to see if there is any progress. The outcome exceeds expectations. Sparky excitedly declares that the training is truly effective. She then heads off to complete another 200 laps, while our boy's phone suddenly receives a notification. Saint Tess asks him to give her a proper name. After some thought, he realizes that calling her Saint Tess forever is not ideal. From that moment on, she is named Little White. Upon hearing the name, Saint Tess is overwhelmed with joy and bursts into tears. The other ants immediately ask for names as well, but naming hundreds of ants individually would be far too time-consuming. As a result, the protagonist assigns them simple numbers such as number 1, number 2, number 3, and so forth. Not long after, our boy returns home. His phone informs him that the ant tribe has evolved into the Formica tribe, thanks to the names granted by the one god and the experience gained through hunting beasts. He finds them incredibly adorable. With the evolution of the Formica tribe, the one god's level increases to 2. This advancement unlocks civilization renaissance. Through his guidance, the protagonist helps the ants build walls, establish training grounds, and develop farmland. Saintess Little White proudly announces the miracle performed by the one god, urging everyone to witness it and worship the great one god together. The protagonist finds himself growing more and more fond of these tiny ants. Next, the protagonist selects the third question mark option. Without warning, a tower radiating sinister energy materializes. The Tower of Warriors appears. Only those possessing exceptional courage and faith are permitted to challenge it. According to the special notice, the survival rate of challengers is merely 1 in 10,000. At the sight of the Tower of Warriors, the ant tribe descends into panic. In response, the protagonist destroys the surrounding walls to seal off the tower's entrance. He firmly warns the ants never to approach the tower out of curiosity. Among the crowd, a single ant looks down at its own hands. It remembers the countless moments when the tribe was pushed into danger, wishing it had been strong enough to protect everyone. Fixing its gaze on the tower, the ant makes a silent but firm resolve. At the same time, within the ant empire, the ant emperor erupts in fury at a cockroach. Even his cockroach army had failed to eliminate protagonist, the dark god of the dark tribe. In a fit of rage, the ant emperor raises his left hand and kills the cockroach in a single blow. He roars angrily, condemning the insects as useless and questioning whether he must personally intervene. Just then, a calm voice interrupts him and asks him to restrain his anger. "Your Majesty." A spider spirit steps forward before the ant emperor and speaks respectfully. It tells him to leave worldly affairs in its hands and focus solely on preparing for ascension to the divine realm. The spider spirit vows that the dark tribe insects and the evil god they follow will be completely eradicated, even if it costs its own life. This mosquito is a true king among its kind. With just one bite, it can drain a person completely dry. At this moment, it has just finished sucking a zombie empty. From the distance, a figure slowly approaches. It is the spider spirit. In her hand is an item known as the cursed needle. She hands it to the mosquito and orders it to kill protagonist, the dark god of the dark tribe. The mosquito laughs sinisterly, saying it wants to taste the blood of the evil god. The spider spirit replies coldly that it may do whatever it wants. Attaching the cursed needle to its body, the mosquito schemes silently. Once it absorbs the evil god's blood and gains immense power, it will overthrow the ant emperor and proclaim itself the new ruler. At the same time, the protagonist is busy trash-talking his teammates. Our boy unleashes the full power of his 20 years of solo hand speed, typing furiously to defend his family's honor. He does not stop until the keyboard is practically smoking. When he finally finishes his rant, he picks up his phone to check on the ants. For now, they are all fast asleep. Suddenly, he notices a stone shaking slightly. In the next instant, an ant lifts it up. The stone is several times larger than the ant itself. This ant is number 1, a warrior of the Gayami tribe, training relentlessly to protect its people. The protagonist scratches his head, wondering if he should lend a hand. In the end, he hands over a bottle of the growth god's protection. Upon receiving it, number 1 is so overwhelmed with emotion that it can barely express its gratitude. Our boy then returns to his computer and resumes trash-talking his teammates, completely unaware that a mosquito is observing him through the window. After watching for some time, the mosquito finally makes its move. It flies over and bites him squarely on the forehead. Instinctively, he slaps the shit out of mosquito. Seriously, why are there still mosquitoes when winter is almost here? In the very next second, an icy chill spreads through his body, as if he has fallen into a frozen abyss. He sneezes, and to his shock, a stream of mucus shoots out 8 meters long. The protagonist decides to head to the bathroom to wash his face. When he looks into the mirror, he sees a demonic mark etched onto his forehead. His blind god's eye immediately recognizes it as the mark of the ugly plague rider, activating the chilling curse. What is this thing? He still has to defend his parents' honor in the game. There is no time to dwell on it. Soon after, the fever curse activates, followed by the muscle pain curse, and then the anemia curse. Panicking, he searches through the divine shop and finds Huada's pill. Just as he clicks to buy it, a mission notification suddenly appears. Filled with despair, he decides to go to the hospital on his own. Meanwhile, inside the hospital, a man cautiously scans his surroundings. He is a devoted follower of an evil god, completely brainwashed into believing only in that deity. His goal is to carry out a suicide attack and offer human sacrifices to the evil god. Back on the protagonist's side, he finally reaches the hospital. By now, he can only crawl along the ground, and it is obvious that the absurd mission was never designed for him to survive. The mission demands that he save 100 humans with sincere devotion. Otherwise, he might as well die. Inside the hospital lobby, the evil godfollower is holding a nurse hostage, gripping a detonator tightly while shouting for everyone to stay still. Sparky faces him from across the room, ready to act at any moment. The protagonist stares at the situation in confusion. When the evil godfollower notices the demonic mark on his forehead, he immediately assumes our boy is an ally. Without hesitation, he shouts at him to come over and help. Let's offer sacrifices together to welcome the descent of the destruction god. Hearing this, Sparky erupts in anger, demanding to know what nonsense the attacker is spewing and telling him he has the wrong person, because that man is her teacher. The bald man sneers and points out that the skull mark on the protagonist's forehead is their sacred symbol. He immediately senses a sinister aura. There is no doubt that this man is a trusted operative dispatched by Mr. John. Our boy fixes his gaze on him and activates Blind God's Eye, successfully peering into his memories. Within those memories, a purple-haired man orders him to intensify the fear of the sacrifices before killing them, so that the destruction god's descent will be fueled by even more offerings. After witnessing this, the protagonist understands just how grave the situation truly is. At that moment, the bald man bellows a chant to the destruction god and prepares to trigger the detonator. Seeing this, the protagonist swiftly extends his index finger, unleashing the all-crushing divine index finger. However, the detonator has already been pressed. Exhausted, the MC shouts to Sparky that this is the decisive moment. The bald man stares at the detonator in shock. No explosion follows in the next second, and sheer terror spreads across his face. Without hesitation, Sparky's lightning descends mercilessly. The bald man is electrocuted on the spot, losing all control over his body. Meanwhile, the protagonist collapses to the ground, already unconscious. Just before his awareness fades, a voice resounds within his mind, activating the necrosis curse. He finds himself in a vast and empty expanse. He walks through this endless space for a long time before a voice finally speaks. Newly born infant god, you have truly forced me to intervene personally. I will make you endure boundless fear, death, and suffering. In the next instant, several towering demons hundreds of feet tall materialize before him. As the protagonist stands frozen in shock, the nightmare flower emerges behind the demons. In a single bite, it devours the once arrogant monsters. Mission complete. Congratulations on surpassing the mission's requirements to save others and survive. The master of the medicinal book is highly satisfied with your benevolence. You have received Huwada's pill. The protagonist awakens a day later with something resting in his mouth. Acting on instinct, he chews it. In the very next moment, every physical injury and ailment is completely cured. As an extra reward, a fragment of that being's divine power merges into his body. Nearby, Sparky is surrounded by crowds begging for autographs. Taking advantage of the confusion, the MC quietly slips away. Back at home, he relaxes on his bed, amazed by the remarkable effectiveness of Huwada's pill. Suddenly, his phone rings. Number 1 is desperately requesting the One God's assistance. The message appears on the screen. One God, I apologize for troubling you. May I receive more of the medicine you once granted me? The protagonist jolts upright and asks what has happened. Number 1 is lying on the ground, his entire body trembling. He intended to pass all the tests in the warrior tower to protect his tribe. As he opened the first door, the tower's voice announced that candidate number 1 was beginning the test. The rock test on the first floor started, requiring him to climb the stairs to the second floor to proceed. Number 1 ran forward, focused. He remembered how the drink given by the great god had raised his level, even forcing him to change professions so he could wear his powerful armor. Lost in thought, he failed to react when a stone suddenly flew at his head. The impact sent him tumbling down the stairs, pinning him against the wall. The stone faded away, but the pain remained real. The ant cried out and called to his god. The protagonist read the subject's memory and stared at number 1's broken body. Worry ran through him as he wondered if the ants he had once killed for fun had suffered like this. The system warned that number 1's life would end in 10 seconds. Panicking, the protagonist granted him the blessing of the god of growth, but it had no effect. With 8 seconds left, then 7, the boy grabbed his head in despair. Suddenly, he noticed his hand and remembered a reward he had received earlier. With 5 seconds remaining, he purchased a special right to use divine healing medicine for 100 coins. His hand glowed as he activated it. With 3 seconds left, he pointed at number 1 and used the medicine. Number 1's body stirred and slowly rose. The protagonist smiled in relief and told him that he had come back to life. Number 1 broke down in tears, thanking his great god. The protagonist sternly reminded him that he had warned him not to enter the tower. Number 1 lowered his head and said he only wanted to protect his tribe. The protagonist tried to lead him out, but the doors would not open. The system declared that number 1 could not leave until he cleared the 50th floor. Confused and frightened, number 1 asked what he should do. a reward from the seeker of eternal right arrived. The protagonist cursed the unfairness as he opened several bottles. A knock sounded. The protagonist drank one bottle and handed the rest to number 1, telling him to drink them. Outside stood a tall man wearing glasses, who asked if the protagonist was the hunter. He introduced himself as Teen, an elite scout of the Guild of the Magnificent, and said it was an honor to meet him. The protagonist quickly stated that he was not a hunter, but Teen replied that he would become one soon and asked for a short conversation. While the protagonist spoke with Teen, number 1 returned to the stairs. Empty vials lay scattered around him. The Seeker of Eternity watched him warmly as number 1 chose to try again. The crystal above the stairs glowed, and a massive stone ball rolled out of the tunnel. Number 1 clenched his fist and struck it with a shout. The ball shattered. The system announced that candidate number 1 had passed the rock test and would receive a blessing. Meanwhile, Teen explained the offer. The annual salary would be 300 million, and they could sign immediately if the protagonist agreed. The protagonist imagined a future free from his harsh manager, filled with writing, good food, and gifts for his beloved niece. He smiled, but Teen added that the guild would take 70% of all hunting rewards. Lost in thought, the protagonist barely noticed Teen's irritation. After assessing him, the protagonist realized with horror that Teen was a servant of the god of destruction. The promised money was bait. The protagonist nervously declined, saying he was busy finishing chapters and was not motivated by money alone. Teen apologized politely and said the guild master sincerely wanted the protagonist. Sweating, the protagonist claimed his stomach hurt and asked to use the toilet. Teen coldly replied that he would wait. Inside, the protagonist stared at his reflection, convinced Teen was like the terrorist from the hospital. He opened his phone, wondering who he could call. Suddenly, the bathtub wall collapsed. Teen appeared through the opening and demanded to know who the protagonist was calling. The protagonist froze in terror, certain that he was finished. Teen frowned at the hero and reminded him that he had asked a question. Who was he supposed to call? The protagonist quickly realized and said that he was contacting the publishing house regarding an important matter. Inside, he trembled like a leaf. Suddenly, a powerful strike hit him, sending his body crashing through another wall as he groaned in pain. Teen adjusted his tie, clearly annoyed. He questioned why they had summoned him when anyone else could have handled it. Grabbing the hero by the throat, he said he would drag him away by force. With ease, the brute lifted him off the ground and shook him mockingly from side to side. The protagonist's vision blurred, and his eyes slowly closed. Teen warned him not to struggle so he could knock him out without much effort. His pupils rolled back, his eyelids slammed shut, and darkness swallowed him. A system notification popped up. An urgent mission had been issued. A mission to save a believer. The protagonist jolted awake. He had to save his only believer on Earth from death. Teen whistled in surprise, noting that the hero was enduring far better than an ordinary person who would have already passed out. The protagonist grabbed the strongman's hand, but the difference in strength was overwhelming. He knew he would be killed at this rate. Suddenly, his eyes snapped open, glowing blue. Before him appeared a ladder, with an unknown figure at the top offering him power. Looking closer, he recognized number 1, shouting for the great god to keep him fighting. The transfer skill activated. Lightning surged from the protagonist's eyes, and the transfer of Steve's body was successfully completed. He looked down and activated the number 1 skill. Teen chuckled, but his expression shifted as the boy's body swelled, becoming incredibly muscular. He stepped back into a defensive stance. He assumed the hero was a hunter specializing in matter creation. The now powerful protagonist stood confidently, and Teen finally understood why the guild master had been so interested in him. The big man removed his jacket, admitting he had feared the mission would be too easy. It seemed he had been premature in envying the one entrusted with lightning. Unsure if the Empress had already been dealt with, he decided to stop holding back and finish the task swiftly. Teen ordered the hero to attack. The protagonist charged forward. Teen dodged and acknowledged the strength behind the strike. As the hero continued to attack recklessly, Teen noticed numerous openings in his defense. Red electricity crackled around Teen's body. He was certain the hero was still inexperienced and swung his fist with a hint of pity. Suddenly, the protagonist seized his head with both hands and drove a knee into his face. Teeth flew, blood sprayed from his nose, and Teen screamed as he bent forward. The protagonist then raised both hands and slammed them like hammers onto Teen's back, smashing his face into the floor. The protagonist quickly pulled out his phone and tried to call Sparky, but it was turned off. Panicked, he asked the system to locate her. The database of followers of the nameless god initialized, projecting a map of the Earth. Sparky's location appeared as the protagonist's eyes glowed blue, locking onto her signal. An unknown figure was approaching Sparky's body, tossing a blade over his shoulder while reassuring her that it would not harm her. He was the sword demon. Bloodied, Sparky called for her master. The demon raised his sword, and blood splashed. A gust of wind carried a flyer announcing the search for the Empress of Lightning into the air. The master sighed heavily. A chilling thought crossed his mind. Could some fool have really finished off Sparky? A terrible premonition gripped him. These events had not yet occurred, but they were quickly becoming reality, reminiscent of the case with the demon of death. Overjoyed, the protagonist decided to change the fate of his follower using the right of God. He noticed a note indicating the sword demon's obsession with swords. Turning to his laptop, he realized he needed a sword. All he had was a small knife, but he took it along with his phone. The cost of altering fate was deducted. A blinding light enveloped him. At his current level, he could perform a miraculous feat. A glowing sphere formed in the apartment as a violent whirlwind spun around him. At the same time, the sword demon looked at the injured girl as she struggled to sit up and asked what he wanted. He replied that it was nothing personal, that he was simply doing his job. Suddenly, he sensed something amiss, turned sharply, and leaped back. A glowing figure materialized before him. The man demanded to know who he was. The protagonist glared and said he intended to cut him down for daring to touch his student. The demon scowled at the hero, remembering how, after walking the path of the sword, he had slaughtered countless geniuses to reach his current realm. He lifted his blood-stained blade and questioned whether the hero was truly allied with the Lightning Empress. Using his skill, he had defeated enemies far stronger than himself. The protagonist moved forward, laughing hysterically, madness clearly written across his face. Never before had the sword demon encountered an opponent who wielded nothing more than a fruit knife. He slid his katana back into its sheath and assumed a battle stance, finally acknowledging the hero's seriousness. A purple aura slowly began to leak from his body. He suddenly lunged, delivering a sweeping horizontal strike aimed at the protagonist's throat. With cold confidence, the demon believed that even S-class fighters would be unable to endure his blade. However, the protagonist remained completely unharmed, still giggling as he held up his knife. There was not even a scratch on his body. The demon's eyes twitched when his attack was stopped by a simple fruit knife. He retreated a step in disbelief, swung again, and unleashed a wave of dark energy. The protagonist casually deflected it. An explosion echoed behind him. Startled, the swordsman released a rapid barrage of slashes, unable to track the hero's position. Calmly, the protagonist blocked every attack. The demon then noticed the Lightning Empress addressing the hero as master, and instantly understood that the hero was a hermit hunter outside the association. Cold sweat dripped down his face as realization struck. He produced an ampoule, fully aware that it would consume his life force in exchange for a single decisive blow. After swallowing it, his eyes shone purple and dense aura wrapped around his body. Lightning crackled as a symbol formed on his face. Showing respect to his opponent, he spoke the protagonist's name and ordered him to prepare for death. The protagonist simply grinned wildly, with veins turning black. The demon charged forward. The moment he entered the kill zone, the protagonist swung. The knife passed cleanly through the demon's neck, activating Shadow Step. The swordsman reappeared behind the protagonist and struck. Dust burst into the air as his sword stabbed into the asphalt. Certain of his victory, he lifted his gaze only to see his sword shatter apart. He dropped to his knees, staring blankly at the broken weapon. Maniacal laughter rang out from within the dust. The protagonist smiled and softly whispered, "Cut." Terror flooded the demon's eyes. Although the protagonist's back was turned toward him, his head twisted unnaturally to stare straight at him. Blue light pierced the demon as countless slashes struck. Moments later, he realized he had not been injured at all. The true battlefield had been behind him. The demon demanded to know why his life had been spared. The protagonist replied that killing him had always been possible, but he chose otherwise. Steam poured off the protagonist's body as he laughed, proclaiming himself the god of the sword. The swordsman felt dread as he understood the truth. Only someone standing at the very peak could carry such a title. Suddenly, the protagonist's strength faded. The system announced that Body of Steel had expired, temporarily sealing his enhancements. Witnessing this, the swordsman collapsed, acknowledging his defeat before the great god of the sword. Surrounded by destruction, he begged to follow the protagonist, swearing to devote his life to reaching the same heights. Feeling awkward, the protagonist thought the man was clearly unstable. The system then confirmed that the swordsman had become his second fanatically loyal follower. Nearby, Sparky lay injured and bleeding. The swordsman rushed over and fed her a healing potion. Golden light wrapped around Sparky as her wounds healed. Trembling, the demon apologized for his disgraceful performance. The system announced that the mission to save Sparky had been completed. Overcome with guilt, the swordsman blamed himself and begged for punishment, even offering to rip open his own stomach. Once again, the protagonist concluded that the man was mentally unwell. When asked whether he would obey any command, the swordsman agreed without hesitation, boasting that very few in the country could rival him. The protagonist ordered him to destroy the Guild of Magnificence in his name. The demon hesitated, fear flickering across his face, before kneeling down and accepting the sword god's decree. A cruel smile spread across the protagonist's face. The system informed the protagonist that he had obtained extraordinary loyalty, The requirements to activate a special privilege had been fulfilled. A notification popped up, stating that the god's multiplying thumb required 100 coins to activate. He imagined himself diving into piles of gold coins and bars, a grin forming on his face as he wondered whether the skill could multiply money. Deciding to experiment, he did not hesitate. Beneath the dark night sky, light spilled from his window as the young man desperately searched for his hidden savings. He shook a piggy bank, and a single coin dropped out. He stared at it blankly, double-checking and confirming that he possessed only 1,001 coins. With an uneasy smile, he raised his thumb and pointed it at the coin. A sharp sound echoed, causing the hero to stiffen. The system announced that the god's multiplying thumb could not be applied to physical objects. The protagonist's face crumpled instantly. Enraged, he tossed the coin away, furious that his life was still plagued by useless abilities. A message arrived from the user's silent nightmare, telling him to stop complaining and start acting like a god. Paired with a terrifying smiley avatar, the user suggested killing someone to release his frustration. The protagonist agreed without hesitation. He was sick of being the one attacked. It was time to make the first move. He asked the system how he could grow stronger. Other users replied. Generous abundance suggested gathering good karma. Silent Nightmare sneered at the idea, calling it inefficient, and proposing a massacre instead. 1,000 Blades cutting through space itself supported the violent approach and mentioned upgrading the Ultra Blade. After some thought, the protagonist decided to pursue both paths. The system unlocked the God-Creator interface, explaining that his choices would shape whether he became a benevolent god or a malevolent one. Sitting on his bed, the protagonist chose to activate the god's multiplying thumb to expand his ant army. He used the skill and commanded his followers to advance. The system announced that vast numbers of Ant Clan warriors were marching toward the Empire's forces and would arrive in 24 hours. Energy poured out from the phone screen as the protagonist laughed, declaring that the enemy would be annihilated. Within the game world, the Holy Maiden healed an injured ant using the god's healing ring finger. She stood tall, urging the others to place their faith in their god and promising them a better future through his blessings. The ant people grew fanatical, and the system reported an increase in good karma as believers multiplied. The protagonist realized that, thanks to the Holy Maiden's efforts, he no longer needed to personally focus on earning good karma. At that moment, his manager called. The protagonist asked about chapter deadlines before casually mentioning that he needed a short break for personal reasons. The manager exploded in anger, shouting and accusing him of slacking off after having already taken a vacation. Irritated, the protagonist wondered what might happen if he turned the god's multiplying thumb on himself. He pressed his thumb against his forehead. A burst of red energy erupted, and a dark-haired clone materialized in front of him. The system confirmed successful activation of the skill, displaying a remaining duration of 6666 seconds. The protagonist ordered the clone to assist with combat while he focused on writing new content. Instead, the clone punched him square in the face, scolding him for his stupidity and beating him repeatedly before finally walking away, looking refreshed. Bruised and sprawled on the floor, the protagonist could still hear his manager screaming through the phone. The clone picked it up and ended the call without hesitation. The clone then activated Cruel Massacre. Its body transformed into that of a horned demon, a grin spreading across its face. A surge of energy flooded into the game as gigantic monsters appeared, smashing through the battlefield and charging toward the ant army. The ants panicked, convinced the enemy was overwhelming. The monsters laughed until streams of red energy descended from the heavens, destroying the enemy monster. The system announced that Cruel Massacre had advanced to C rank due to large-scale slaughter. Elsewhere, enemy forces finally understood they were facing an evil god. Survivors warned the Lord Lady that this being was closer to a demon, explaining that corpses disintegrated into dust after death. Lady Spider immediately ordered the 10 swords and the Great General to be summoned. Despite the danger of leaving neighboring borders vulnerable, the Black Flame had to be eliminated before the Emperor returned. Hidden in the shadows, an unknown individual listened quietly, swearing to personally claim the evil god's head. Back in the real world, the protagonist sat on the floor, battered and drained. He cursed his isolation, feeling betrayed even by his own clone. Generous Abundance jokingly asked to meet the handsome clone. The protagonist then noticed 21 missed calls and multiple messages from his manager, all confirming the termination of his contract. The system reported total success. The Holy Maiden had retrained as a missionary, prisoners were secured, attributes had increased, both light and dark coins were obtained, and levels had risen. The protagonist shouted that none of it mattered anymore. The system announced that after the successful expansion of the nomads of the Ant Kingdom, the territory of the believers had grown. A total of 131,502 captives from the Grass Kingdom were taken. Number 1 advanced to Novice Muscle Warrior, Number 2 advanced to Spearman, and Number 3 advanced to Archer. The White Tiger was promoted to a soldier within the military group, and a large amount of light and dark coins had been gathered. The protagonist shouted that he had a deadline and did not care about the game. However, a new structure appeared in the system window. Rescue a fanatically devoted believer. The target was the sword demon. The reward stated that the hero's talent would bloom like a flower. He attempted to ignore it, but the system automatically began displaying events from the sword demon's perspective. The sword demon was bound in chains. Chiolmi from the Magnificent Guild, protected by the god of destruction and able to wield powerful flames, grabbed his hair and warned that if he talked, she would grant him a painless death. Beside her stood Chioldu, muscular and marked with scars. The sword demon said nothing. Using his special right, the hero gained access to the believer's memories. The sword demon had been sold as an infant to a black house and raised to become an assassin. His training was brutal, doing push-ups with a heavy stone boulder on his back. After awakening his Teichi abilities, he began carrying out assassination assignments. Later, he encountered Chiolmi and Chioldu, who shared a similar past. They became rivals. As he pursued the way of the sword to grow stronger, his swordsmanship eventually brought him to true enlightenment. Now imprisoned, he was accused of attacking the Magnificent Guild. Chioldu insisted on killing him immediately, but Chiolmi argued that Apostle John would pay millions to receive him alive for sacrifice. Chioldu even threatened her in frustration. He seized the sword demon by the hair and lifted his fist to strike. At that moment, the system activated the transfer to the believer in danger. The protagonist borrowed number 1's steel body, and just in case it was forgotten, number 1 was the ant who climbed the tower in the previous chapter. Strength surged through his body. As Chioldu attacked, a surge of energy tore the sword demon free from his chains. Lightning crackled around the hero. He tried to merge Spurky's lightning storm with number 1's steel body, but a system restriction triggered a reboot. With his current divine power, he could not use more than one powerful believer skill at the same time. Chioldu's kick struck his neck. Lightning burst outward and instead hit Chioldu, knocking him down. The system confirmed that the hero endured the reset thanks to steel body. Chiolmi then unleashed flames. The system reported that he resisted them due to steel body. Although the fire burned intensely, it felt oddly comforting, like relaxing in a hot spring. Chiolmi was certain she had reduced him to ashes, yet he remained standing, faint glowing shields shimmering before him. When she attacked once more, he countered by striking her neck with his palm. The borrowed time expired. Steel body returned to normal. Chiolmi collapsed. The system declared that the mission to rescue the fanatically devoted believer had been successfully completed, and the hero's talent would now bloom fully. He waited for a dramatic change, wondering if his writing talent would become extraordinary. Nothing noticeable happened. Instead, the sword demon gazed at him with admiration, praising the incredible way he had defeated his enemies. Before they could depart, dark smoke swirled into view. Apostle John stepped forward with a smile. He was the one overseeing sacrifice rituals for the god of destruction. He expressed that it was an honor to meet the main character. The protagonist inwardly labeled him another lunatic. He shouted, then froze in place without responding. The protagonist concluded that this pervert was truly a genuine psycho. The protagonist lifted his eyebrows in shock when he saw the total number of ritual sacrifices. He lowered his stance before the apostle, realizing he could not read the inscription hidden behind the question marks, so he had to remain cautious. Johann placed his hand over his chest and smiled, calling him brother. The protagonist stiffened, silently commanding him not to step any closer. Johann opened his arms wide, trembling with excitement because he had finally come face to face with the protagonist. The sword demon moved in front of his god, warning Johann not to advance, but Johann clicked his tongue in irritation, struck him across the face, hoisted him into the air, and flung him away, leaving a glowing streak behind. The protagonist found it unbelievable that the sword demon, who had once defeated the Lightning Empress, was cast aside so effortlessly. Johann then questioned which god the protagonist served. Our boy lifted his fist and firmly declared that he followed his own god. A skill transfer began. He unleashed Lightning Storm, sweeping his arm forward as a radiant trail cut through space and bolts of lightning wrapped around his fist. Johann's eyes widened as the luminous punch collided with his chest. At the same time, a butterfly-winged creature headed toward the black tribe village concealed within a thick forest. A man, carrying bundles of branches, cautioned the children not to wander too deep while ants scurried and played nearby. The creature's bright eyes flared open as it released a wave of poison. Vivid green currents burst from its body, and the ants began coughing, clutching their throats in pain. He understood that eliminating followers would reduce the evil god's strength. Returning to the fight, the protagonist struck Johann once more, another glowing trace marking the blow. The apostle was hurled backward and slammed into the ground. The MC inhaled heavily, reflecting that even in combat the pervert still held true. Yet streams of energy gathered around Johann's feet, and he rose again, encased in shining power. No matter how often he was hit, Johann kept getting back up, calmly declaring that it was pointless, since he would always revive. The time limit on the borrowed powerful abilities had run out. The protagonist had nothing remaining. Johann taunted him, asking if that was the extent of his brother's strength. Realizing Realizing he had no alternative, our boy pressed his thumb against his forehead and activated the skill that multiplies the thumb of a god. A flash of light erupted, and an irritated clone appeared before him. Johann chuckled, entertained that the hero possessed a second personality. The protagonist felt uneasy because the clone had beaten him before. The clone exhaled deeply and warned that the Gayami tribe was in peril, reminding him that divine power diminished when followers perished. Wrapped in spiraling energy, Johann attacked again. The clone evaded swiftly. The MC attempted to shield himself, but the shock wave blasted him backward. Calling Johann a worthless weak thing, the clone instructed protagonist to burn it and then vanished in a streak of light. The protagonist shook with uncertainty while Johann prepared another strike. Suddenly, our boy recalled the radiant energy that had once surrounded his hand. Realizing the clone's meaning, he slowly raised his middle finger toward Johann. With a confident smile, he activated the divine middle finger, understanding that his own power had been with him all along. Standing before Johann, the protagonist unleashed the condemning middle finger of a god. His hand radiated light, and the man's eyes widened in astonishment. The protagonist let out a battle cry and swung his hand. A wave of fire surged toward the apostle. In reality, only a faint flame flickered above the guy's middle finger. Frowning, he realized he had forgotten it was just an ordinary lighter. The villain frowned miserably and asked if his opponent was finished playing games. Waves of dark energy swirled around him. The young man extended his burning finger, trying to think of a move. The hero closed his hand and activated the multiplying thumb of a god, snapping his fingers. Several small fireballs shot into the air. Johann raised his eyebrows in surprise as the flames stopped before him without causing harm. Turning aside, the man declared the game's over, noting he was running out of time. The apostle summoned clusters of purple energy. Closing his eyes, the hero resigned himself to the possibility of dying here, abandoned by everyone, even his second personality. Frowning in fear, he begged for help, wondering why he hadn't been finished off yet. A loud sigh echoed in the air. The villain clutched his side, noticing the deep wound. Johann asked why his regeneration wasn't working. The system reported that the merciless hellfire was absorbing the enemy's strength. Flinching, the protagonist realized he should have been warned that his skill could act this way. The man raised his hand, and the guy's eyes widened tensely. The apostle couldn't believe such a bizarre ability had nullified his regeneration. A wave of dark energy knocked the young man to his knees. He gritted his teeth against the sharp pain. Inside the game, the villain narrowed his eyes, disdain written across his face. Flapping his wings, the moth resolved to annihilate the black tribe to weaken the evil god. Suddenly, a strange premonition made the monster look upward. A man was flying toward him, the evil god of the black tribe. Taking a fighting stance, the insect promised that soon nothing of his power would remain. The protagonist's clone thrust his fist forward. The monster's eyes widened in shock. The doppelganger struck him hard, leaving only a cloud of smoke in the monster's place. Seeing the ants lying on the ground, the young man asked if they were truly dead. Lying on the floor, the protagonist felt excruciating pain, as if all his bones had been crushed to mincemeat. The system reported that the number of believers was dropping, potentially weakening divine powers. Gritting his teeth, the player pleaded with the game to stop sending so many notifications. The system asked if he wanted to spend 5 million coins to save the believers. Raising his eyebrows, he wondered if he could use the healing ring finger of a god on himself. Grinning, the protagonist decided it would make him invincible. Placing his hand to his forehead, he activated the healing skill. Johann shuddered as waves of green energy radiated out. The notification indicated that healing himself would cost 10 coins. Throwing up his hands in frustration, the guy was indignant that each follower cost 1 coin. Sitting in the lotus position, the young man confirmed the action. The system reported he received 5 million coins for saving lives. Joyfully clasping his hands, the hero mused that karma truly exists. The apostle asked how his opponent was still standing. Dark energy surged toward the player. Frowning, he activated the steel body skill, forming a protective force barrier. Extending his middle finger, he declared it was his turn. Using the god's divine middle finger, the protagonist unleashed a wave of fire. Johann leapt to the side to avoid it. Landing, the man closed his eyes and laughed, deciding his opponent would not become a meaningless sacrifice. Holding the fire, the boy called for silence. The apostle announced that 9,099 sacrifices were ready. The youth raised an eyebrow in confusion, pointing at him. The villain declared his enemy would be the cherry on top of the sacrificial offering in the name of his god's indulgence. Johann laughed, thanking him for choosing the final victim. The ceiling opened. A red glow spread through the space. A massive yellow eye appeared, observing the heroes. Trembling, the hero asked what it was. Pointing his index finger forward, the protagonist attempted to stop it. The notification stated that this rite could not be used on the god of destruction. The protagonist opened his mouth in shock. The man bent over, coughing blood. The apostle shouted, insisting they hadn't agreed on this. The villain fell. Waves of dark energy filled the area and moved toward him. Closing his eyes, he thought this was the end. His silhouette appeared in the sky. He had hoped for a bright future. The mountain valley was shrouded in clouds. Holding a knife, the young man leaped forward, aspiring to become a powerful and merciful god, but all hope lost meaning. The great god who devoured mountains was the god of destruction. The monster rose, opening its fanged mouth. Blood covered the surroundings. The inscription Abyss flashed on the ground. A bloody girl lay there, losing his beloved. The god of destruction's world shattered, as did his mind. He screamed, scarlet blood flowing from his eyes. A flash appeared above the protagonist's head. His eyes were closed. Suddenly, they opened. The god of destruction had once sought peace, but had now become the embodiment of vengeance. A colossal sword etched with ancient hieroglyphs stood embedded in the earth. Frowning, the protagonist decided to aid the god in taking revenge on the villains. The blade suddenly ignited, glowing crimson. When the protagonist lifted his gaze, a vast yellow eye appeared in the sky, while purple tentacles twisted around him. Paralyzed by terror, the sword demon longed to assist the sword god, but could not move a single finger under the crushing horror. The protagonist called out while cracking his knuckles, ready to demonstrate how to fight enemies, especially those serving depraved masters. Hearing a voice, the young man turned. Johann, wrapped in snakes, insisted everything was a lie and not what they had agreed upon. He pleaded for mercy, shouting that God could not take the life of his humble servant. The apostle's body shriveled as his life force drained away. The god he worshipped was nothing more than a bloodthirsty demon. The enormous eye glared downward. The protagonist frowned and told it to stop staring. The sword demon believed the burning gaze alone had nearly withered Johann. When he saw his comrade raise his hand, the man decided he would not be afraid. A radiant sword materialized in the player's grasp. The brunette's eyes gleamed while the apostle looked around in shock as the demonic pupil tightened. The hero slashed forward and activated Ultra Blade, a power bestowed by 1,000 blades capable of tearing space itself apart. The weapon expanded tenfold, becoming an incarnation of carnage that greatly strengthened close combat. The gigantic eye appeared fearful, and the face of its owner manifested before the blade. Seeking vengeance, the eye unleashed its tentacles and roared. Leaping into the air, the muscular youth swung furiously and ordered the enemy to be silent. Tentacles lunged toward him. His eyes widened with fury as he wished the creature back to hell. The giant eye faltered, its pupil flashing with sudden vulnerability. Meanwhile, the 12th district lay in devastation. Soldiers spread through the area searching for survivors. One man speculated that the rift was SSS rank, meaning a monster capable of destroying an entire nation awaited them. With his hands in his pockets, a hunter asked what had happened. A soldier reported that someone had survived. The association had arrived, stunned that anyone had lived. When questioned, the survivor only laughed. The hunter concluded he had lost his sanity. Before them sat a withered Johann, and the commander ordered that he be taken for medical treatment. The apostle recalled the giant eye releasing its tentacles while snakes coiled around him. A violent explosion shook the room. The protagonist rested the sword across his shoulder as the villain laughed. The protagonist's eyes shone brightly, and he could be regarded as a god among gods. Later, the corpse of a dragon lay before a gathered crowd. Mena frowned as people praised her. Yuen asked whether she truly possessed S-rank power, since dragons resist mental attacks. She demanded the stone be returned. The young man reluctantly tossed the artifact back, lamenting its value of 100 million. She warned him to obey if he wished to live, dismissed the dragon as a sluggish lizard, and vanished. The swordsman called her eternally dissatisfied and suggested celebrating their S-rank dungeon victory without casualties. 2 days later, blue clouds drifted above the buildings. The protagonist's niece placed a damp towel on her uncle's back and teased him for being old. He shivered at the pleasant sensation and protested that he was not old, pointing out that he did not even have a wife. His muscles still ached from the recoil of the giant sword. Suddenly, the child pointed ahead. A sword demon cloaked in dark energy knelt with his head to the floor, asking for his master's command. The boy asked whether he had repaired the bathroom door. The follower confirmed he had. Embarrassed, he declared he would never forgive himself for inconveniencing the sword god. The young man realized he was dealing with a religious fanatic and would have to tolerate such odd behavior. The protagonist asked whether all tasks had been completed. The sword demon saw no reason to clean up the remains of the splendid guild. He explained that an S-rank huntress and the Hunter Association's special team had begun a large operation to dismantle underground organizations across Korea. The player asked if they meant Mina, whom he often saw on television. The follower confirmed this and described her as a recognized beauty. The protagonist noticed she and Sparky shared the same surname and assumed they were related despite being completely different. Rising from bed, the young man told his niece to return to her mother. He intended to visit the healing center to test his new healing ability. The system announced that he had prevented the descent of a fragment of the god of destruction and awarded him 1 million coins. Smiling, he realized his rise had been extraordinary. ordinary. Then he read that the eye he fought was only 1/100th of the true monster. Imagining its real size, he wondered how it compared to the dragon of the abyss. A notification asked whether he wished to accept a promotion mission. The system explained that he must gather 1 billion believers and eliminate 1 billion intelligent beings. The poor boy frowned, realizing he had to accomplish both. From the top floor of the apartment building came a disgruntled voice, as he wondered how he could possibly complete both tasks at once. The protagonist's eyes widened in disbelief as he wondered if he truly had to recruit 1 billion believers or slaughter them. Then he noticed an alternative: recruit or eliminate 10 S-rank hunters. A system window appeared, listing the promotion missions. Low-rank Good God mission: gather 1 billion believers or convince intelligent beings of S-rank or higher to follow him. Low-rank Evil God mission: accumulate atrocity points by killing at least 1 billion sentient beings or slay S-rank or higher sentient beings and absorb their power. The protagonist pressed his palm to his forehead, convinced there had to be another way. A faint smile formed as he imagined character icons and realized he could pit these stalkers against one another. With subtle manipulation, he could complete the objectives. He chuckled while staring at his phone and mentally commanded them to begin fighting. A girl nearby watched him nervously. He stood in a hospital corridor packed with people. Hearing loud puffing sounds from behind the door, he stepped inside. Sparky was doing push-ups despite being wrapped in bandages. From now on, let us call her Marie. She sprang up happily when she saw him and said she was glad he came. When he asked why she was not resting, she replied that she could no longer lie down because she felt glued to the bed. Turning around, she showed him her back and said she was already healed and even the scars had vanished. Embarrassed, he turned away as she began removing the bandages. Suddenly, a girl appeared behind him, ripped off her mask, and smacked Sparky across the back in anger, causing Mari to scream. Mena crossed her arms and scolded Mari for undressing in front of a man. She seized the protagonist by the collar and demanded to know his relationship with her sister. Realizing this intimidating woman was Mari's relative, he awkwardly introduced himself as a physical education teacher from the academy, while Mari secretly gestured for him not to reveal the truth. Mina questioned his rank, dismissing him as weak. Mari defended him, insisting her master was impressive and possibly stronger than her sister. Mina removed her cap and glasses. The protagonist recognized her as a famous S-rank hunter known for her beauty and likely Sparky's older sister. Mina challenged Mari, asking whether reaching A rank had made her fearless. Her eyes gleamed as she activated mind control. Mari froze and was ordered to kneel. She struggled but ultimately obeyed. The protagonist stepped forward and asked Mina to calm down. She shouted at him to leave and used mind control on him as well, but it failed. Mina's eyes widened in shock. Mari stood up and proudly declared that her master had resisted her sister's primary ability. Mina demanded his rank. Sweat trickled down his face. Admitting he was G rank felt humiliating. To his surprise, Mina suddenly bowed, apologizing and saying it was difficult to recognize a mountain standing too directly before one's eyes. She asked him to look after Mari and left porridge for her, acting indifferent yet revealing her concern. Mina, age 24, is the messiah of the god of destruction and carries the curse of the abyss. Before she left, the protagonist asked about her recent hunts and whether she had been cursed. When he mentioned sensing the curse of the abyss, her expression turned frightening as she demanded how he knew. He explained that he sensed it through a detection skill. She brushed it aside, though her mood shifted abruptly. Inwardly, he compared her to the two-faced Janus. After she departed, he reflected on her overwhelming presence as an S-rank hunter with telepathy and wondered how he could ever persuade her to believe in him. Mari noticed his concern. Instead of answering, he suggested they train on the roof. She agreed eagerly. On the rooftop, lightning flashed across the dark sky. Behind him appeared a giant tiger bound in chains, radiating electricity. He pointed his finger and used the crushing index finger of a god, but nothing happened. He tried again. The lightning flickered and dimmed, yet the chains remained intact. Exhausted, he bent forward, realizing that freeing the beast would elevate Sparky to S rank and make her his first high-rank follower. Frustrated, he tossed an item onto the bench and wondered whether he was doing something wrong. He positioned Mari, and a system window appeared above her. Mari, 19 years old, first believer of the protagonist on Earth. S rank currently sealed. Electric abilities partially sealed. He forced himself to focus on the seal as if threading a needle. Mari asked why he was staring so intensely. Another system prompt appeared. He asked who had sealed her. Confused, she asked what he meant. A bead of sweat slid down his face. He then asked where her sister had gone. Mari touched her cheek and asked why he needed to know. With a faint smile, the protagonist realized They could not move forward without having a heartfelt conversation with Mina. Elsewhere, the voice reassured the apostle not to be afraid. The moment he descended to earth, every inhabitant of this world would receive salvation. At the center of the raging waves stood a massive concrete prison. Uniformed guards patrolled the corridors without pause. Inside one of the cells, Johann knelt with his head lowered. In his darkest moments, he had always relied on God's miracle, yet everything had proven to be a lie. Johann looked down at his trembling hands. Salvation had been the sole idea driving his body and mind, yet he had believed in God with blind devotion. Tears slid down his cheeks as he questioned why he had once considered it an honor to become food for a god. A gigantic eye suddenly opened, its red pupil glowing ominously. Johann looked up in terror, screaming that it was disgusting and not what he wanted. Even so, he believed the protagonist was different, the one true God, a god among gods. He pictured the protagonist's somber face, blazing eyes, and body wrapped in streams of flame. Staring through the barred window, Johann pleaded for the world's salvation and for forgiveness for himself. Closing his eyes, he prayed that the merciful protagonist would accept his fallen soul. The system answered that he had converted to the faith of the protagonist. A tremor ran through his body as he thanked the protagonist for accepting his sinful soul. Without warning, a figure dressed in dark clothing appeared behind him wearing a plague doctor mask. A masked girl stepped forward beside the figure. Johann looked up in fear, wondering how anyone below S-class could possibly reach him. Assuming the association had come to claim his life, he declared they were jealous of his abilities, admitted to killing many people, and insisted he could still kill her. The girl laughed coldly and said he had never even set foot in the abyss. Energy gathered at her fingertip as she declared he would answer for attempting to kill her sister, Miri. Agony burst through Johann's chest. Streams of dark energy coiled around his body as he screamed, his cries echoing throughout the prison corridors. Elsewhere, the protagonist sat cross-legged, irritated that meeting Mina was so difficult. Celebrity life must keep her busy, he reasoned. He felt relieved that the sword demon had finally left him alone and imagined a farewell letter promising to remain with him in spirit. His phone lit up with a system notice that a new follower, Johann, a human and former follower of the god of destruction, was now fanatically devoted to him. Promotion progress appeared showing 512, 326 ordinary followers out of 1 billion required. Followers with S-class potential or higher were 1 of 10. Johann should count as above S-class, he thought. He had resolved 2 problems at once. Moments later, the system reported that the fanatic Johann had died. Before he could fully process it, red system windows appeared. Everything belonging to the fanatic would be absorbed. The absorption process could cause unbearable pain. Energy burst from the phone. The protagonist screamed as power surged into his body. Light poured from his apartment window, while energy spiraled around his fists. Gasping for breath, he realized he had absorbed Johann's abilities and wondered if the process could be any less painful. News reports soon stated that an underground hunter gang leader had died of a heart attack in his cell. Though unnamed, the protagonist knew it was Johann. One S-rank follower was now counted in both the good and evil promotion missions. He lay back on the bed, unsure whether he should feel relieved. Johann had been a follower of destruction. Could this truly be good news? Thinking about the future, the protagonist considered becoming a hunter for fame and money, but quickly dismissed the idea. He was a writer, even if only a third-rate one. After uploading 10 chapters based on real events, he checked the comments. One reader wrote that the author lacked talent and rushed the story. Another felt sorry for the ants being slaughtered. A third simply wished him a good night. The protagonist froze, realizing he might need to find another job. Suddenly, a knock sounded at the door. Assuming it might be the sword demon, he rolled up his sleeves and opened it. Instead, a worried Miri stood outside. She dropped to her knees, clasped her hands together, and begged her master to help with an extremely difficult matter. Miri shut her eyes and continued pleading for help. Guys, is it just me? Or is Miri becoming cuter chapter by chapter? The hero watched her and felt he simply could not refuse. A face like that was a forbidden move. Saying no to those eyes would make him a complete idiot. Protagonist frowned, then gave a thumbs up, and Miri shouted with delight. The system immediately reported that the follower on the ground had gained 10 faith points. The hero lifted his brows in surprise, realizing that merely agreeing had earned him faith. Miri beamed and said her master was the best. The guy looked at her suspiciously, wondering what she wanted, because he had a bad feeling about all this. The following day at the Hunter Academy, crowds gathered near the entrance. Wearing a business suit, the main character walked ahead of the girl and asked if she truly wanted him to act as her guardian. Miri smiled broadly and confirmed it. He assumed she had missed too many classes, and that a guardian had been summoned. He briefly wondered whether asking his older sister would have been easier, but the protagonist pictured a terrifying scene and quickly dismissed the idea. He frowned, finally understanding the price behind those 10 faith points. Miri admired his suit and asked why he did not dress like that more often. He replied that he only owned one. She offered to buy him several since she had plenty of money, but he refused, telling her to spend expended on herself. They hurried toward the steps to avoid being late. A man approached and asked what he was to Miri. She smiled and said he was her older cousin. Junuk stroked his chin and remarked that they did not look alike. The protagonist thought they had already been exposed. Miri insisted they were very similar, while he wondered who she thought she was fooling. Junuk, 33 and famous for his muscular build. Miri clenched her fist and demanded how he could call her brother ugly. Junuk apologized, saying he had expected Mina to come. He assumed the protagonist must also be a hunter, since the girl's entire family was exceptional. The protagonist pointed at himself and insisted he was ordinary, but Miri turned proudly and declared her brother amazing. Nearby hung a sign reading Principal's office, with a horn attached to a wooden board. Scene shift to past. A soldier scanning the sky spotted a massive stream of dark energy forming. A giant creature with glowing green eyes roared. The soldier warned that such a monster could tear Korea apart. It was a demonic ogre, a Supreme S-rank monster. The uniformed officer demanded immediate action, but even the hunters present were no match for it. Suddenly, a man appeared beside the ogre's head, blue energy gathering in his hand. He drove his fist forward, releasing a blinding flash. The ogre collapsed, cracking the ground beneath it. The man stood beside the corpse, surrounded by streams of bright energy. Witnesses were stunned that he had defeated a Supreme S-rank monster alone. No one recognized him. Inside the academy, Choi Kang-sen leaned against a nightstand with folded arms, saying he only wanted a peaceful life. Yet monsters kept interrupting everything. He noted warily that some people still thought of him as a janitor. He added that he was too old for that role, and now needed to train the younger generation and cultivate the academy's talent. He mentioned one troublesome girl, Miri, who had recently grown stronger. Only the association's higher-ups knew about the internal barrier restraining her power. She simply needed control and gradual development. She was scheduled to visit today, and he planned to explain everything. Outside, Junuk asked whether the protagonist was really a writer. He admitted he enjoyed reading and asked about his work. The protagonist explained it was a story about an ant colony controlled through a mobile phone, featuring a holy virgin and a muscle-bound ant. Junuk repeated the words muscle-bound ant in bewilderment. They arrived at the director's office. Junuk knocked and announced Miri and her guardian. The protagonist nervously straightened his tie, bowed, and introduced himself as Mira's cousin standing in for her guardian. Choi Kang-sen greeted them warmly. Suddenly, both men shouted in recognition. Protagonist remembered seeing Choi Kang-sen drinking from a bottle during their previous encounter. He froze, realizing this was the S-class hunter Choi Kang-sen, known as the janitor. Choi Kang-sen also smiled, thinking it impossible that the same man would appear here. The protagonist greeted him cheerfully, glad to see him well. Without warning, Choi Kang-sen told him not to come closer and dropped into a fighting stance. Junuk sensed the tension and stepped between them, afraid an ordinary man, like the protagonist, might die from a single blow. Miri rushed forward, begging them to calm down, but Choi Kang-sen shouted for her not to interfere, warning that a terrifying creature could appear at any moment. Junuk could not understand, yet he sensed the director feared something about this man. The protagonist protested, asking if this was how one treated someone who had kindly given him 5,001 the last time they met. Choi Kang-sen cried out in fear, spun around, and smashed through the window. He leapt from the third floor, landed in a cloud of dust, and sprinted away while stunned onlookers stared. Junuk stood frozen in shock. The protagonist scratched the back of his head and wondered aloud what was wrong with the director. The boys stood quietly in the director's office, unsure of how to react. Looking out the window, they saw Choi Kang-sen sprinting away in terror. Junuk muttered an apology, explaining that the director had been a bit off ever since the last mission. The main character realized he had not been thinking clearly before. The old man quickly disappeared, his heels flashing as he ran, and Junuk remarked that the director would be back soon. Later, Choi Kang-sen sat calmly in a chair, sipping tea. The main character Miri and Junuk were all present. After sampling the cookies, Miri froze for a moment before handing one to the protagonist, insisting he try it. He refused. As she tried to persuade him, the old man's gaze fixed intensely on the protagonist taking the cookie. He noticed the director staring sharply and saw a notice indicating that Miri had presented him a tribute, Choi Kang-sen's favorite snack. Surprised, the boy wondered if that explained the intense stare. Standing up, he asked the principal what he wanted to say, offering to step outside for a private discussion. The director panicked, insisting it be addressed in front of everyone. Confused, the protagonist suggested contacting the guardian since Miri had been skipping classes, emphasizing she needed supervision. Closing his eyes, he assured them he would take care of it. Junuk thanked him, thinking this might be sufficient. As the protagonist and Miri prepared to leave, the old man shouted, halting them. Choi Kang-sen, serious, declared that he could not allow them to go. The protagonist asked asked why. The director asked if he knew how long he had been searching for him, then jumped up, pointing at the protagonist and shouting that this was fate. He mentioned that the academy was well equipped and suggested conducting tests. Raising his fists, he proclaimed he wanted to measure the protagonist's strength. Confused, the boy asked why. The director promised to grant anything if he succeeded. Without hesitation, the protagonist requested that all of Mira's absences, past and future, be ignored. Choi Kang-sen agreed happily, and Junuk was ready to intervene, but the director insisted they not let this opportunity slip by. In the lab, the protagonist entered the capsule. The assistant asked if it was dangerous for an ordinary person. The director reassured her it was important but safe. Reviewing past records, the girl noted that he had a maximum rating of G class, approaching the sphere of waste, which was used to test abilities and track god followers and victims. The boy felt uneasy. Choi Kang-san instructed the protagonist to place his hand on it. Immediately, a blast of mana struck, blinding him. The sphere sparkled and made noises as it assessed his power. When the test concluded, the protagonist sighed. The girl remarked that it was interesting. Embarrassed, he hoped his talent would finally be acknowledged. Excited, he asked if he had achieved S-class, but she coldly responded that he was G-class, showing a paper confirming that all indicators were within G-class. Nothing remarkable. The boy and Miri were stunned. The assistant explained that these were the most average results possible. Choi Kang-sen angrily asked if she was certain. She confirmed, noting only a 0.1% margin of error. The protagonist discovered that Eunbi was Choi Kang-san's daughter. He wondered whether the sphere measured god power. Choi Kang-sen asked his daughter if she was sure. Eunbi pushed him away, confirming it. The director was shocked, pondering how the boy had achieved this, and smirked, thinking he might need to push him if a special ability were activated. The protagonist asked Miri if she wanted to eat on the way back. She agreed happily. Choi Kang-sen, furious, shouted that they were not finished yet. The protagonist asked, "What again?" The director commanded a fight to demonstrate the protagonist's abilities. He claimed the machine had erred, which angered Eunbi. The protagonist refused, uninterested in the director's offer. The boy thought about gaining another S-class follower for his mission. Clenching his fists, he smiled and shouted, "He agree." Miri and Eunbi looked on, confused. Choi Kang-sen clenched his fist in joy, shouting that they needed to move to the training hall. Behind him appeared Junuk, the boy challenging him, eyes burning with rage, insisting it was unacceptable for the Legend of Korea, the director, to fight a lower-class person. Everyone was gathered in the training hall. The protagonist stood in the arena, touching the iron net and wondering whether it could withstand superhuman strength. Suddenly, his opponent asked if he wanted to wear protective armor. The protagonist replied that Junuk hadn't worn any. The man strapped on a chest guard and gloves, his voice menacing as he said experience made all the difference. The protagonist calmly put on his gloves, saying it would be fine. Rage flashed in Junuk's eyes as he warned the boy that he wouldn't regret it. Outside the arena, the director cautioned the protagonist, explaining that Junuk was one of the top B-rank hunters, with vast combat experience, capable of taking on even an A-rank hunter. The protagonist was surprised. Mari jumped up, shouting that he could handle it and should defeat the enemy in a single strike. Confused, the protagonist felt the terrifying aura radiating from his opponent. A student shouted that the sparring match was about to begin. Seeing the crowd of spectators, the protagonist felt nervous. Junuk suggested finishing quickly before more people arrived. The protagonist agreed and told the teacher to attack. Junuk, clearly enraged, readied himself to unleash the full power of a seasoned hunter. He swung, but the protagonist dodged, catching him off guard. Thinking it was just beginner's luck, Junuk attacked again, closing the distance and striking with full force. Fear washed over the protagonist, yet a bright glow illuminated his face. At that instant, Junuk hit him with everything he had. The spectators cheered, but shock crossed Junuk's face. The protagonist was still standing, raising a finger glowing with God's crushing index finger. Junuk couldn't move. With a flick, the protagonist sent a beam of light hitting Junuk's forehead, sending teeth flying as he lost consciousness, and was hurled across the arena. The principal watched calmly, arms folded. The protagonist rubbed his nose, realizing that Junuk's true strength was comparable to A-class. Mari cheered while the students were stunned. Junuk was taken to the medical department. The protagonist, excited, observed from behind the bars. Choi Kang-sen approached, shouting that it was his turn. The principal removed his shirt, surprising the protagonist. Choi Kang-sen clenched his fists, his stance radiating menace. The protagonist noted that the man's muscle strength seemed limitless, thinking that the old man on steroids was eager to fight him, though he had no other way to attract powerful believers. Choi Kang-sen, shocked that the protagonist had defeated Junuk and manipulated the rank measurement, realized it still didn't compare to what the protagonist had done before. He decided he needed to knock him out to be sure. The protagonist laughed maliciously, The director, eager, shouted to begin. The protagonist proposed a wager. The loser must grant a wish to the winner. Choi Kang-sen's agreed, provided it wasn't illegal. The protagonist raised his index finger, promising a modest wish. Both men readied themselves, tension thickening. As Choi Kang-sen's advanced, rage filled his eyes, and mana enveloped him. The protagonist jumped back, realizing just how formidable the old man was. Suddenly, Choi Kang-sen's clothes tore away from his steel-like body, shocking the crowd. Miri watched proudly. Choi Kang-sen's grinned, calling the protagonist the person from the S-class prophecy, a being both cruel and noble. The protagonist, bewildered, realized he was being forced to join the academy, despite wanting to become a novelist and win a Nobel Prize. Suddenly, Choi Kang-sen's leg shot toward his face. The protagonist dodged as Choi Kang-sen's swung a punch with all his strength. Miri and Eunbi watched in fear. The director shouted angrily, urging the fight forward. The protagonist covered his face, while Choi Kang-sen's yelled that he wanted to witness the genius from the prophecy firsthand. For now, the protagonist allowed him to fight with his full power. The main character roared in fury and lunged at his opponent. The old man did not step back and instead pressed forward. They clashed brutally, trading heavy blows. Hero barely evaded the director's crushing strikes, while Choi Kang-sen failed to block the protagonist's lightning-fast attacks. The spectators stared in shock. Suddenly he noticed the old man stumble and seized the opportunity, driving a hard kick into his side. Blood burst from the director's mouth, yet he instantly countered, slamming his fist into the protagonist's side with equal force. The protagonist cried out in agony. Choi Kang-sen wiped the blood from his lips and laughed, saying it was not bad at all and that he expected nothing less. The protagonist trembled from the pain, realizing this was truly S-class power. The old man raised his fists again, clutching his stomach. The protagonist declared with certainty that he would defeat him if he used all his strength. The principal pointed at the boy enthusiastically and said the academy needed people like him, so he had to win even if it demanded everything he had. The protagonist lifted his fists and replied irritably that the old man would not live to see that. He sprang forward, warning that he was attacking, but halted when he noticed his opponent trembling. A powerful magical aura coiled around the old man's legs, and a terrifying force erupted from the principal. His blazing eyes showed complete seriousness. The students gasped, whispering that the principal was now fighting at full strength. Shaking, they wondered whether they should intervene. The protagonist showed no fear and charged with a scream. Miri watched in terror, thinking things had gone too far, and that they had to stop it. The protagonist rushed forward as the old man prepared his strike. They launched simultaneous blows. At that instant, a notification appeared before the protagonist's eyes stating that the number 1 had passed the test on the 11th floor of the Warrior's Tower. Another message reported that a loyal follower of the protagonist had presented tribute. He wondered if this was really the time for such things. He remembered that every time he cleared a test, a reward appeared. Seeing the old man's fist hurtling toward him, he decided to defeat Choi Kang-sen first and deal with the rewards later. The director thought he should at least break his opponent's arm. Their fists collided and a magical explosion thundered through the arena. When the light faded, the protagonist stared in confusion while Choi Kang-sen, sweat beading on his face, glared menacingly. Suddenly, a bouquet of roses materialized in front of the protagonist's face. He stared at the stunned director and asked if this was the tribute. Irritated, he flung the bouquet aside, asking why he needed flowers at such a moment. The bouquet flew straight into Choi Kang-sen's face. He turned his head and muttered flowers. At that moment, the silhouette of a terrifying monster appeared before him. Screeching, the man smashed through the net and fled in horror, tears streaming down his face. He thought he could not lose, yet he could not face that creature either. The protagonist watched in confusion and wondered what was wrong with him. Was he allergic to flowers? He wondered if he had one and whether Grandpa would become his believer. He checked his phone but saw no notification and decided he would recruit the man anyway. A message from the ant appeared. Several million residents wished to settle in his territory and begged for mercy and protection. The protagonist grinned, shouting that his believers were increasing on their own, which meant everything was going smoothly. Turning aside, he saw Miri looking at him joyfully and realized it was time to leave. System notifications reported that the settlement's infrastructure had improved and the number of protective walls had doubled. As he walked down the hallway, he read that houses for new believers were complete and that the number of followers had increased. Even after expanding his territory, he realized it was still not enough. The poor boy slapped his face, wondering how he could attract 1 billion believers. The ants pointed at the great god, saying he was telling them something. They asked if it was a prayer text, and the holy maiden urged everyone to pray together. The protagonist received her notification and wondered what they were doing. The ants raised their paws and began shouting curses, mistaking them for prayer. The protagonist closed his eyes, realizing why it was better not to curse in front of children. He continued walking, wondering where the director had gone. Suddenly he looked at his phone and screamed in shock. The sword demon staggered through the forest with his last strength, pressing a knife against his body and preparing to stab himself. A message appeared asking whether he wanted to save his believer, the sword demon, from committing suicide. In front of a house, the sword demon stood with a blade held upright against his chest. Without warning, a portal opened behind him, and the protagonist stepped out. The moment he saw the man, he called out to him. The sword demon turned around with tears in his eyes, asking if this was truly the sword god, then suddenly screamed and begged for help. The protagonist pressed a hand to his forehead and let out a long breath. He walked up, gripped the blade, and gently pushed it away. The sword demon dropped it to the ground. The protagonist then delivered a hard kick, and the sword demon exhaled in relief. Turning to his follower, the protagonist angrily demanded what kind of madness had possessed him, asking why he was acting as if his guts were trying to crawl out. The sword demon replied in confusion that it was not like that. Startled, the protagonist paused and said quietly that the man had not intended to take his own life. Then he spun sharply and declared that someone else was responsible. Behind him stood a figure in a suit radiating a terrifying aura. A plague mask covered the face, its eye lenses glowing with red flame. Beneath the mask lingered a chilling indifference as she repeated to herself that she felt nothing and wondered where he had come from. The protagonist studied the suited girl carefully without speaking. The sword demon suddenly pointed at her and warned him to be careful, saying she was using a bizarre technique. He explained that she had been whispering in his ear from afar, forcing him to act according to her commands. The protagonist narrowed his eyes and said calmly that this was not a man. The sword demon stared in shock and asked what he meant. The protagonist looked more closely and asked Mina what she was doing here. Realizing she had been identified, Mina stiffened and asked irritably what he wanted from her when their paths had never crossed. A screen above her indicated she was under the influence of the curse of the abyss. Mina grew angry and demanded how he knew that. The protagonist scratched his cheek and replied that he had already mentioned his sensory ability. The sword demon watched in amazement, wondering if they truly knew each other, and thought with admiration that only someone famous would be followed by people like this. The girl removed the plague mask and tossed it aside. Pulling back her hood revealed a displeased expression. Seeing her face, the sword demon cried out in shock at how beautiful she was. Standing beside the discarded mask, she stated sternly that it was a class artifact with concealment properties and released a surge of magical power, declaring that no sensory skill could penetrate such protection. The sword demon shielded himself from the overwhelming aura. The protagonist raised a hand calmly and asked again what she was doing here. Mina pointed at the sword demon and shouted that she intended to kill the creature and asked if that was not obvious. The protagonist asked why. The sword demon explained that she was one of the dozen people he could not kill. The protagonist told Mina that the sword demon might seem like a jerk, but was actually a good person. She gasped, veins bulging at her temples, and demanded whether he truly expected her to ignore the attempted murder of her little sister. The protagonist wondered how she knew everything and asked why the man had ultimately not harmed her. The sword demon stared ahead in fear. The protagonist said that if Mina insisted, he would handle the matter himself, since he was currently responsible for Miri. Mina crossed her arms and replied that his arrival was convenient. He could deal with the man now, and she would deal with him later. The protagonist asked in bewilderment why. Mina said Joan had called him by name, so he should stop pretending. She claimed she knew everything and accused him of scheming around Mary after playing a trick on the savior to gain favor. The protagonist thought her conclusions were ridiculous and countered with a question. If she cherished her sister so much, why had she sealed her abilities? Mina froze, wondering how he knew. She glared at him menacingly, thinking she should kill him. The protagonist recalled the bloody seal Mina had created in exchange for her life, now pledged to the abyss, the same seal placed on Miri that he could never remove. Mina herself had created it. He said he could not understand why anyone would sacrifice their life for such a seal and asked if she was jealous because her sister was stronger and she feared losing power. Enraged, Mina released a torrent of mana and shouted for him to stop speaking nonsense. The protagonist stared in horror. The sword demon sprang forward with his sword. Mina extended a finger of mana toward his head, called him a pathetic insect, and unleashed a devastating blast. Pain exploded across his face. He slammed into a tree, gouging the ground and groaning in agony. The protagonist turned at the impact. He looked at the injured man with alarm, then back at Mina, shocked at how effortlessly she had brushed him aside. He anxiously asked how he was. With blood on his lips, the sword demon warned him to be careful and said rumors claimed Mina was not S-class, but SS-class. The protagonist stared at her, wondering if she was truly that powerful, since he himself was only G-class. Mina launched a stream of mana toward him, wishing for his death, then clenched her hand and crushed the energy. Suddenly, a violent pain gripped the protagonist's heart. His eyes widened in terror. He screamed and clutched his chest. The sword demon let out a scream of horror as the protagonist gripped the terrifying magical energy in his heart. Mina's eyes blazed as she smiled. The protagonist shuddered in pain and cursed. The sword demon screamed, convulsing and pleading with the sword god not to die. Suddenly, the protagonist turned to his follower and shouted that he wasn't dying. He scratched at the spots where he had been attacked, frowning, and said he was just ticklish. Hearing this, Mina lowered her hand. Tears filled the sword demon's eyes as he cried out in joy. A satisfied grin spread across the protagonist's face as he cheerfully said it had finally released. Mina, shocked, realized she had poured all her strength into the attack, yet he had only found it ticklish. She asked where he had even come from. After a pause, she admitted he was stronger than she had expected, but mental powers weren't the only abilities she possessed. The sword demon rose, positioning himself behind his god. Mina was enveloped in terrifying magical energy, lifting her into the air. Flames ignited around Mina's hands. The sword demon warned the protagonist to be cautious, explaining that Mina was nearing SS rank, even in her physical attributes. The protagonist thought about Korea having no hunters stronger than S class, and if the sword demon was correct, she was far beyond that nervous old man. Mina, her eyes burning, commanded the protagonist to burn. He was caught off guard. The sword demon lifted his sword. Mina unleashed a massive fireball. The protagonist screamed as flames engulfed him. The sword demon attempted to leap away. A powerful explosion seared the protagonist's hand, causing him to scream in pain. A massive crater formed beneath them. The protagonist thought to himself that he had almost been incinerated. An ice ball materialized in Mina's hand. Mocking them, she asked if they were already done, and added that she was merely sampling. She amplified the ice ball 100-fold, directing all her energy toward them, shouting that it was time to freeze. A beam of ice struck the ground in front of the protagonist. He shivered as the frost crept up his legs. The sword demon was entirely encased in ice. The protagonist wondered how many different attacks she had. It seemed too many for someone specializing in mental powers. The protagonist poured all his strength into breaking the ice. He shouted at the sword demon that it was nothing but an illusion. Mina laughed cruelly, admitting he was right. She had constructed mental spheres that embodied illusions. She lifted boulders with magic, claiming that a perfect illusion was indistinguishable from reality. The two watched in horror as she hurled the rocks at them. Mina declared that even if it was only an illusion, captivity would still mean death. She sent a massive chunk of earth flying, shouting that if he didn't want to be crushed, he had better comply. The protagonist feared she might ignore him, but he decided it was worth a try. Standing tall, he said he was just an ordinary G-rank author of Even Ants Have Gods. Mina frowned in confusion. He explained that he wanted nothing from Miri, only to help her reach S-class. He pleaded with her to remove her seal. Mina questioned whether he was insane, then screamed that if he wished to die, she would gladly oblige. She sent a tremendous surge of mana skyward, her eyes blazing with fury. She lifted an enormous stone with sheer force. The sword demon watched in terror as the rock fell with full impact. Mina sneered at them, calling them pathetic worms. The protagonist activated Steel Body, clenched his fists, and shattered the stone into fragments, and just before impact, a massive explosion of energy erupted. Mina shielded her face from dust and debris as the protagonist's power tore through the enormous sphere. Shards of stone and earth scattered in every direction, yet he remained completely unharmed. Mina stared, stunned by his strength. The protagonist grinned wickedly, and the sword demon erupted from the ice, exclaiming with joy that he no longer had any doubts about the sword god. The protagonist turned to his subordinate, warning him not to lie, because he could clearly see the doubt when the sword demon had called it an illusion. Frozen, the sword demon sank to his knees and begged for forgiveness. Observing them, Mino assumed he was just an ordinary G-class. The protagonist pressed his foot onto his subordinate and turned to Mina, declaring that he still had matters to settle with her. Appearing directly in front of her, he asked if she would like to speak normally. Horrified by his sudden speed, Mina leapt back and screamed, pressing 2 fingers sharply to his head to activate her power. The protagonist exhaled, wanting only to converse, but Mina suddenly unleashed her ultimate technique, Universal Mind. Her power engulfed him from every direction, lifting him into the air. Confused, he looked around to see a space that was soft yet elastic, with waves rippling beneath his steps and a fresh, natural scent filling the air. Despite the emptiness, he could hear the chirping of summer, night insects. Moving with his eyes closed, he felt unstoppable, as if he could move mountains. Bending forward in fear, he glanced up to the starry sky, whispering to himself how beautiful it was. Suddenly, a loud voice behind him startled him. Mina gritted her teeth and screamed that he was driving her insane. She spun, extended her index finger, and activated her power. The protagonist's body was swallowed by the water she directed at him. He screamed in terror as Mina calmly told him it was over. Using his final strength, the protagonist activated God-crushing index finger, groaning with pain, but it proved insufficient. Mina advanced, explaining that he would not die in the real world. He would merely become a vegetable, losing all memory of his wicked intentions. Tears streaming, the protagonist yelled that this was just as terrible as facing two of everything else. Mina pressed her foot harder on his head. The protagonist realized this was not real. Mina offered him one last chance. Angrily, he insisted that they only needed to talk. She pressed further, asking who he was and what he wanted from Miri. Sheepishly, he addressed her as the respected Mina. She smiled and encouraged him to continue. The protagonist blurted that he could see her underwear. Mina recoiled, and he imagined her expectations. Short dress. Stepping on someone's face. Mina thrust her hand forward, shouting for the pervert to die. The water began pulling him in. Clenching his teeth, he fought to stay awake while pondering why Mina had sealed Miri's abilities. The system signaled that the protagonist had met the conditions to use the rose that blooms in the night. Mina, unsure if she was hallucinating, noticed the water bubbling. Suddenly, an enraged monster exploded from it. Mina leapt back in fear, realizing that the ultimate nightmare had arrived. The flower, resembling an enormous flycatcher, roared with fury, spraying saliva as it lunged toward Mina. Startled, she jumped back just in time. The flower had grown several times larger, and Mina wondered how it had entered her imaginary space, where nothing could intrude without her permission. Fear gripped her as she realized it might be the work of the main character. The predatory flower struck again. Overwhelmed with terror, Mina could only dodge. Its menacing aura reminded her of the day she first encountered the monstrous abyss dragon, whose burning eyes and terrifying presence had scarred her life. Kneeling, she tried to resist, shouting that she couldn't die like this. Vines coiled around her, lifting her toward the flower's roaring mouth. She screamed, refusing to die before avenging the dragon of the abyss. Tears streamed as she whispered that it could not be yet. The monster swallowed her. Meanwhile, the main character rested atop a massive rose flower underwater, sleeping peacefully, feeling unusually comfortable as the vines of his flower rose protectively around him. Elsewhere, the protagonist moved forward, taking in the strange surroundings. Activating the blind eye of the god, he noticed a statue and learned from the system window that he was inside Mina's nightmare. Exploding buildings and scenes from 15 years ago unfolded before him, the abyss dragon attacking a city, killing hundreds, including Miri and Mina's parents. The dragon had marked the sisters for future sacrifice. Mina's body was enveloped in mana, her life driven entirely by the desire to avenge her parents. Years passed, and rumors spread that the abyss dragon had perished, but Mina refused to believe it. Her strength grew through the curse of the mark, though it shortened her lifespan. Mina sat before dripping blood, realizing her life would not be long. Miri, smiling, expressed her desire to avenge their parents as well. Unable to remove the mark, Mina feared for her sister and sealed her abilities to preserve her life. Miri screamed in anguish, pleading with her to stop, but Mina cried, asking for forgiveness. The protagonist wept as he witnessed it all, calling out to her, "Miss Mina." The system revealed that Mina's universal mind had been absorbed by the rose, dispersing her abilities. The cocoon of the mind enclosing the protagonist collapsed. Tears streamed down his face as he turned back. The sword demon anxiously asked if the protagonist was all right. He remained silent. The sword demon laughed, astonished that even Mina had been defeated, wondering what would happen next. Could she be sold into slavery? The protagonist dashed to the motionless girl, lifting her as she began to show signs of life. Exhaling in relief, he watched as Mina opened her eyes and whispered, "Mama." The protagonist frowned in confusion, unable to comprehend what was happening. If you're excited for the next part, leave a comment and I'll do my best to bring it to you as soon as possible.